3 weeks after they buried Harlan Pruitt, his children stood in the kitchen dividing up his life, and when there was nothing left to divide, they handed their mother the key to the shed he had never once let her enter. "That's the last of it," Dwight said. He set the key down on the table like it was a stray screw, not worth a second look. "The workshop. County's got it tax-liened at $2,200. Nobody's gonna fight you for that one, Mom." Sherry didn't even glance up from her phone. "It's condemned, Louise. Dad's junk pile. You can have it." Louise Pruitt sat at the same table she'd wiped down every morning for 51 years and looked at the key. Brass, worn smooth in the middle where a thumb had pressed it 1,000 times. Her thumb mostly, not Harlan's. The house had sold for $340,000, and that money was already gone into two directions, split down the middle, before the closing papers had even cooled. The savings account, $85,000, Harlan's whole working life folded into a passbook, had gone the same way. Pruitt's Hardware on Depot Street, the store Harlan built with his own hands and Louise's ledger sheets, now had Dwight's name over the door and Dwight's signature on a loan he'd taken against the lot next to the old depot. Sherry had a deposit down on a condo in Corolla with a view of water Harlan Pruitt had never once seen in his life. And Louise had a padlocked shed with a tax bill bigger than its worth. "You could have asked me first," Louise said. Quiet, not loud enough to be a fight. "Asked you what?" Dwight said. "It's junk, Mom. Rusted machine parts. Half the roof's caved on the north side. I had Purnell come out and look at it for the developer survey. He said there's nothing in there worth the diesel to haul it off." "Your father didn't think so." "Dad kept a lot of things nobody needed," Sherry said, and there it was, that little smile she did, the one that meant she thought she was being kind. No offense. He was 78. People get like that. Louise had done the hardware store's books for 26 years. Every invoice, every August inventory count, back when Dwight was still in diapers and long after he wasn't. She knew what a real appraisal looked like and what a rushed one looked like, and Purnell's number had the smell of rushed all over it. She didn't say so, not yet. She'd learned a long time ago that the moment to say a true thing is rarely the moment somebody hands it to you on a platter. She picked up the key instead, turned it over once in her palm. It was warmer than the room. Nobody at that table asked her what she was thinking. Nobody had asked her that in longer than she could easily count. She had learned to keep the answer to herself, and she had also learned, over 40 years of practice, exactly how to hold something back without anybody noticing there was anything to hold. Piney Ridge sat where Route 9 bent hard around Company Hill, a town built by the railroad and mostly forgotten by it. The depot at the center of town had been shut since 1994, its loading dock grown over with sumac, its freight doors chained. A man named Bill Farrow had been coming through town for 2 years now on behalf of a firm out of Charleston, walking the depot grounds with a folder under his arm, talking to the county commissioners about warehouses and a rail spur and jobs that hadn't existed in Piney Ridge since Louise was a young bride. He had offered the county $1.2 million for the 40 acres running north from the depot platform if the parcels could be cleared and combined. Dwight's lot, the one he'd put up as collateral, sat right against that line. Louise knew the shape of that whole deal the way she knew the shape of her own kitchen in the dark. She'd read every article the Piney Ridge Register had run on it. She'd sat in the back row at 2 commission meetings nobody in her family thought she'd bothered to attend. The workshop stood behind the house on a strip of grass Harlan had never let get long, though he'd let plenty of other things go in his last years. A cinder block building with a tin roof, one window boarded from the inside, a brass padlock on a door painted the same flat green every single year since 1985. Louise had painted that door herself. Every year, on the 9th of March, Harlan's birthday, she had walked out with a rag and a can of brass polish and shined that padlock until it threw back the sun. She had never once been given a key. Not during the good years, not during the store's best decade, not during the 2 winters Harlan spent dying by inches in the front bedroom with an oxygen line running to his nose and his hand waving her off whenever she asked what was behind that door. "Not yet, Louise," he'd say, every time, like it was a phrase worn into a groove. Not yet. She had asked him one more time than usual the week before he died, sitting by his bed with a bowl of broth going cold on the nightstand. He'd looked at her a long moment, the oxygen line hissing soft between his words. "Count every board, Louise," he'd said. "The books never lied to me." She hadn't understood it then. She'd thought it was the medicine talking, the way it made him say things sideways in those final weeks. She'd patted his hand and told him to rest, and 3 days later he was gone, and she had put the sentence away in the same drawer where she kept things she didn't have room to carry yet. 40 years she had polished a lock she was never allowed to turn. 40 birthdays. She had never once asked why out loud, not really. Not past that first decade when the asking had worn her down more than the answer ever would have. A marriage teaches a person where the doors are and which ones stay shut, and Louise Pruitt had built a good life around the shape of a locked one. Some wives would call that submission. Louise never did. She called it patience. And she was old enough now to know the difference mattered more than anybody young ever believed. That night, the house emptied out. Dwight drove back to his place on the far side of the ridge, already on his phone before he hit the porch steps, some call about closing dates and county assessors. Sherry left a plate of casserole in the fridge like that squared things, kissed her mother's cheek, and was gone in her SUV with the beach house paint samples still sitting on the passenger seat. Louise stood alone in the kitchen a long while after the taillights disappeared down Depot Street. The house was too quiet in the way a house gets when it has just finished being picked over. She still had the key in her apron pocket. She'd been carrying it there since the table, moving through the evening like a woman carrying a stone she hadn't decided yet whether to set down or throw. There was one thing nobody in that kitchen had thought to ask about, and Louise hadn't offered it, because a woman doesn't hand over what she's kept safe for 40 years just because somebody finally remembered to look her way. She had kept things back before. She knew how to keep a thing back and still smile at the table. She put on Harlan's old barn coat, the one that still hung by the back door because nobody had gotten around to giving it to Goodwill, and she stepped out into the yard. The grass was wet already, the first heavy dew of a March evening in the mountains. Company Hill sat black against a sky just starting to show stars, and somewhere down toward the depot, a dog was barking at nothing in particular the way dogs do in small towns after dark. The workshop waited at the edge of the yard, square and low, its green door pale under the porch light spilling out behind her. Louise had walked toward that door 1,000 times with a polishing rag in her hand and never once with a reason to open it. Tonight she had a key instead of a rag. She crossed the wet grass slow, the way a woman crosses ground she has walked her whole life and still respects. Her hand found the padlock she had shined every March for 40 years, cool and solid under her fingers, the metal worn thin from all that patient polishing. She fit the key to the lock. It turned easy, like it had been waiting on her the whole time. The hinge gave a groan, then let go. Louise pushed, and the door swung in on its own weight. Cold air met her first. Then the smell, machine oil, cut wood, dust settled so long it had turned to a kind of skin over everything. She stood on the threshold and didn't move for a moment. 40 years of looking at a green door from the outside. Now she was looking out from the inside, at her own yard, at the porch light, at the shape of the house where she'd raised 2 children who'd never once asked to come out here with her. She stepped in. A workbench ran the length of the far wall, cluttered with jars of screws and a vise bolted to the corner. Pegboard hung above it, tools traced in faded paint outlines, most of the hooks empty now. A wood stove sat cold in the corner, its pipe rusted where it met the roof. The window Dwight called boarded wasn't boarded from outside vandalism. It was boarded from the inside, nailed shut, deliberate. This wasn't a junk pile. Junk piles didn't have swept floors. Louise ran her hand along the workbench, and that was when she saw the paper taped just inside the door, at eye level, where nobody walks in without seeing it. Her name in Harlan's blocky hand. Louise. She peeled the tape loose with 2 fingers, careful, like the paper might tear from just breathing on it. Count every board, Louise. The books never lied to me. I made sure they'd never lie to you either. Same words he'd said to her from the bed 3 days before he died. She thought it was the medicine talking. It wasn't. Her hands weren't quite steady. She folded the note once, along its old crease, and put it in her coat pocket next to the key. Count every board, she said out loud, to nobody. Her voice sounded strange in the small room. "All right, Harlan. All right." She looked down at the floor. Wide pine planks, laid straight, nailed down decades ago. She hadn't looked at a floor this way since she was young enough to play hopscotch on the porch boards and skip the ones that creaked. She started at the door and walked the first row, counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3. The boards ran the width of the shed, 12 feet maybe. She reached the workbench wall and turned, started the next row back. It took her 3 passes before she understood he didn't mean count them like inventory. He meant count them like a code. Numbered from the door, same direction every time, same row. She started over, slower. On her knees now, one hand flat against each board as she went, feeling for anything that wasn't flush. 10, 11, 12. The 13th board rocked under her palm. Not much, just a hair of give where every other board sat solid. She pressed again to be sure. It rocked again, a small definite motion like a loose tooth. "There you are," she said. She worked her fingers into the seam at the edge, and the board lifted with a dry little shriek. Underneath, cut into the joist bay, sat a tin box. Old cocoa tin, rust freckled along the lid, a strip of black electrical tape holding it shut. Louise sat back on her heels and looked at it a long moment before she touched it. She had done books for the hardware store for 26 years. She knew what a cash box looked like when a man didn't trust a bank with something. She peeled the tape away and lifted the lid. Bills, banded in old rubber that had gone brittle and split when she touched it. She counted without meaning to, the same way she'd counted invoices for a quarter century. $640, mostly 10s and 20s, some bills soft as cloth from handling. Under the bills, wrapped in a scrap of chamois cloth, was a small brass key, smaller than the padlock key. This one had a flat, toothy head, the kind that fit a box lock, not a door. She turned it in her fingers under the bare bulb hanging from the rafter. "Toolbox," she said. Harlan kept an old metal toolbox on the bench, dented at the corners, a snap-on box he'd had since before Dwight was born. She'd dusted around it 100 times without ever trying the latch, because the latch had never needed a key before. It always just opened. She stood, knees complaining, and crossed to the bench. The toolbox sat where it always sat, under the pegboard, its lid closed. She lifted the lid and it swung easy, same as always, no lock needed for that top tray. Wrenches, a tape measure, a coffee can of nails. She lifted the tray out. Underneath, where the bottom of the box should have been, sat a second lid, flush and hinged, with a small keyed latch set into it. A false bottom, built clean, built by a man who knew how to make metal do what he wanted. Her hand shook a little now. Not fear. Something closer to the feeling of a door opening on a hallway she hadn't known was in her own house. The small key fit. The latch gave with a soft click. Inside lay a single ledger book, cloth-bound, corners gone soft with age. She lifted it out like it might be hot. She opened the cover. The first page was dated in Harlan's hand, March 1979. Columns, ruled by hand, some in pencil gone silver with age, some in ink faded brown. Figures running down the page, $50, $22, $110, and in the margin of nearly every entry, 2 letters, small and careful, EV. She didn't know those initials, not from the store's books, not from any invoice she'd ever kept in 26 years of keeping every invoice that came through that door. She sat down on the stool by the bench, the ledger open on her knees, the cash box and the note and the little brass key all sitting together now like pieces somebody had finally set on the same table. Outside, a car passed on Depot Street, slow, the way cars went past this late when nobody local was driving. She didn't look up. She turned another page. More entries. The same 2 letters over and over, next to sums that didn't match anything she remembered from Pruitt's Hardware. $1,200 in one column, dated 1981. 2,000, dated 1983. Numbers too large for a shed full of rusted tools and too old to belong to any account she'd ever balanced for Harlan. "Who are you?" she said quietly to the initials on the page. "EV. Who in this town is EV?" She thought of every name she knew in Piney Ridge, every man who'd ever come through the store, every regular at the counter for 30 years. It took her longer than it should have because she wasn't looking at the name that was closest to her the whole time. She was looking for a stranger when the man those initials belonged to had been standing at Harlan's side at that same depot for 3 decades. She closed the ledger, careful, and held it against her chest the way a woman holds something she isn't ready to explain to anyone yet, not even herself. Somewhere out past the workshop wall, the pegboard hung silent over the bench, tools traced in paint where real tools used to sit. She hadn't looked twice at it yet. She would. But not tonight. Tonight she had a ledger, a cash box, and a name in the margin she meant to run down before she told a single soul in her family what she'd found behind that door. Earl Voss lived 3 miles past the depot on a gravel spur. Nobody paved anymore, in a house with a carport instead of a garage and a hound dog that didn't bother to bark. Louise had known him 50 years, the way you know a man who stood next to your husband every working day and never once came in for supper. He'd been at the funeral. He'd shaken her hand and said he was a good one, and then gone quiet, the way men that age go quiet at funerals, like talking too long might use up something they needed later. She parked in his gravel drive a little after 9 the next morning, the ledger wrapped in a dish towel on the seat beside her. Earl came to the door in suspenders, no shirt buttoned right, reading glasses pushed up in white hair. Louise. He looked surprised to see her and then not surprised at all. "Come on in out of that wind. I won't stay long, Earl. You'll stay as long as the coffee's hot." He said it like a rule, not an invitation. She sat at his kitchen table, chipped formica, a calendar from the feed store still on February. She set the ledger down and opened it to the first page. "I found this in Harlan's shop," she said, behind a false bottom in his toolbox. "There's a tin box, too. Cash." And a note he left taped inside the door. Earl didn't touch the book yet. He put his glasses on first, slow, like a man giving himself time. "He left you a note," he said, "after 40 years of not letting you near the place. Count every board, Louise," she said. That's what it said, and it said the books never lied to him. Earl's jaw moved, but no words came out of it for a second. He picked up the ledger then, turned it toward himself, and went quiet in a different way. Not surprised quiet, reading quiet. He didn't speak for a long minute. Louise let him have it. "E.V.," he said finally, tapping the margin with one thick finger. "That's me. I didn't know your initials meant anything to those numbers. They mean everything to those numbers." He looked up at her over the glasses. "Louise, how much do you know about the depot land? I know Bill Farrow's been trying to buy 40 acres off the county for over a year. Warehouses, a rail spur. I know Dwight's lot backs right up to the line. That's the part everybody knows." Earl closed the ledger, kept his hand flat on the cover like he was holding a door shut. "There's a part nobody knows. In 1978, your husband and I put together a piece of paper. A trust. We didn't have money, like rich men have money, Louise. We had a little, and we had a lawyer in Beckley who owed Harlan a favor from the war. We put the 40 acres under the depot into that trust so the railroad couldn't sell it out from under this town when they finally shut the line down for good." Louise felt her hands go still on the table. Why would the railroad let 2 shopmen do that? "They didn't know they were letting us." Earl almost smiled. The land had gone unclaimed on the tax rolls for years. Nobody in Charleston was paying attention to 40 acres around a dying depot. Harlan filed it quiet, filed it legal, filed it right. County clerk stamped it same as anything else that came through that office. Nobody read it because nobody thought it mattered yet. And these numbers. She touched the column. $50, $22, $110. That's what I paid him, twice a year, for my half of the taxes on that trust land, and what he paid me back some years when the store carried us both through a bad winter. Earl tapped a bigger figure, the $1,200 from 1981. That one there, that's the year the county tried to fold it into a delinquent parcel sale. Harlan borrowed against the store to cover 3 years of back taxes in one shot so we wouldn't lose it. He never told you that, did he? He never told me anything, Earl." Her voice came out flatter than she meant it to. 40 years, and he never told me one word about any of this. Earl took his glasses off, folded them, set them on the table like he needed his hands free for what he was about to say. I asked him once why he kept it from you, he said. Long time ago? You want to know what he told me? I'm sitting in your kitchen, Earl. I think I do. He said if you knew, you'd worry it into the ground. He said you'd want to sell it quick and safe the minute anybody offered real money, because that's the kind of woman you are, careful. He wanted it to sit until it was worth something nobody could talk you out of. He wasn't hiding it from you because he didn't trust you, Louise. He was hiding it so nobody else could talk you out of it before it was time. Louise sat with that a moment. Outside, Earl's hound finally decided to bark at something, one long note, then quiet again. There's more, isn't there, she said. You said that like there's more. There's a lot more. Earl leaned back in his chair. Louise, did you look behind the pegboard? The pegboard over his workbench? That board doesn't just hang tools. Harlan built a panel into that wall back when we still had the machine works running down at the depot. There's a safe back there. Floor safe, set in concrete. That's where the real books live. What you found in that toolbox, that's just the two of us settling up between friends. What's behind that pegboard is the whole trust, every account, and the deed itself. Louise felt something in her chest tighten and loosen at the same time, like a knot finally being worked instead of pulled. Why didn't he just show me the safe and be done with it, she said. Why the tin box, the false bottom, all of it? Because he wanted you to earn your way to it, Earl said. That was Harlan. He never gave anybody a thing they hadn't worked for, not even you, especially not you. She almost laughed, and it came out closer to something else. He made me polish that padlock every year of our marriage, she said. 40 years, Earl, on his birthday. I never once asked to stop. I know it, Earl said. He used to tell me that was the only day of the year that door got looked after right. Said the county comes and looks at a building, they don't care what's inside it. They care if it's kept up. A shed falls down. County calls it abandoned, and a trust sitting inside it can get challenged in court. He needed that building standing and cared for every single year, or the whole thing could come apart on a technicality. Louise stared at him. He had me protecting it, she said slowly. The whole time. I thought I was just being a good wife. You were being both, Earl said. He knew what he was doing, Louise. He always did. She drove home with the ledger back in the dish towel on the seat. Company Hill rising up dark green against a gray sky. The depot's old water tower leaning the way it had leaned since before Dwight was born. She turned onto Depot Street just as her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. Dwight's name on the screen. She let it ring twice before she picked up. Mom. He sounded rushed, the way he always sounded now, like every conversation was squeezed between two better ones. Good news. Pharaoh's people set a date. 2 weeks from Thursday, County Commission Chambers, 10 in the morning. They're signing the whole depot package. My lot's part of it. This is real money finally coming through. That's fast, Dwight. Fast is good. Fast means done. A pause, and she could hear him weighing something before he said it. Listen, there's one more thing. Your shed's on the edge of the survey line. Purnell says it might overlap the depot parcel by a few feet. Nothing that matters, but Pharaoh's lawyers want everything clean before the signing. I need you to sign a quitclaim on it. Just a formality. Louise looked out the windshield at her own porch coming up on the right, the workshop's green door just visible past the corner of the house. A quitclaim on what, exactly? She said. On the shed, Mom. On any claim to the land under it. It's paperwork. 10 minutes at the courthouse. I'll think about it, she said. There's nothing to think about. It's a rusted shed on a dollar amount that doesn't even cover the tax lien. You're not giving up anything. Then it shouldn't matter to Pharaoh's lawyers whether I sign it or not, Louise said. Should it? Dwight went quiet on the other end, the kind of quiet that told her he hadn't expected her to push back at all. I'll come by tomorrow, he said finally. We'll talk it through. You do that, Louise said, and hung up before he could add anything else. She sat in the driveway a minute with the phone in her lap, the ledger warm from the truck's heater beside her. 2 weeks from Thursday, 10 o'clock, County Commission Chambers. She looked at the workshop again, its green door catching the last gray light of the afternoon, and thought about a pegboard with its tools traced in faded paint, hooks holding nothing now but the shape of what used to hang there. She went inside to get a flashlight and a screwdriver, because whatever was waiting behind that board, she intended to know exactly what it was before Dwight came around asking her to sign anything. The flashlight beam found the pegboard first, tools traced in white paint on brown board, hooks empty where wrenches used to hang. Louise set the screwdriver flat against the top edge and pushed. Nothing. She tried the sides next. Nothing. Then she pressed a hand flat against the middle and pushed straight in. The whole panel gave, hinged on one edge, swinging back like a door built to look like a wall. Behind it, concrete. Set into the concrete, a floor safe, black and square, a foot on each side, a brass dial on its face gone dull with age. "There you are," she said quietly. She knelt down in front of it. Her knees didn't like the floor anymore, but she stayed down there anyway. She turned the dial slow, listening the way she'd watched men do in old movies, though she knew that was mostly nonsense. She tried Harlan's birthday first, October the 4th, 40. Nothing. She tried their wedding date. Nothing. She tried Dwight's birthday, then Sherry's, out of some stubborn hope that he'd tucked his children into the one place he never let them go. Nothing moved. She sat back on her heels and let the flashlight rest on the floor, its circle of light climbing the safe's black face. "You'd have made this hard," she said to the workshop, to Harlan, to whoever was listening. "You'd have made sure only one other man on earth could get me in." She thought about that a long moment, then reached for her phone. Earl answered on the second ring. "Louise. There's a safe, Earl, behind the pegboard like you said. I can't get it open." A pause and she could hear him breathing, thinking. "Give me 20 minutes, he said. "Don't touch the dial anymore. You'll walk right past the number and not know it." He came in through the workshop door in a barn coat over pajama pants, flashlight of his own in hand, moving slower than he used to, but moving steady. He knelt where she'd knelt, studied the dial without touching it. He'd never use a birthday, Earl said. Man didn't trust dates people already know. Ask anybody in this town when Harlan Pruitt was born, half of them could tell you close enough to guess it right. He wouldn't put a door on that. Then what would he put a door on? Earl looked at her and something in his face said he already knew. Try 3-14-58. "What's that?" "The day the depot machine works hired us both," Earl said. "Same morning. Same crew. Nobody left alive remembers that date but me. Harlan used to say it was the only day that ever really belonged just to the two of us." Louise turned the dial. Right to 3, left past 0 to 14, right to 58. The handle gave under her hand with a low metal groan, like it hadn't turned in years and didn't want to now. The door swung open. Inside sat 2 ledgers, thicker than the one in the toolbox, and a flat metal document box, and a manila envelope gone soft and yellow at the corners. Louise lifted the envelope first. Her hands weren't steady. She didn't try to make them be. She undid the clasp and slid out a folded document, heavy paper, a raised seal pressed into one corner, a recording stamp in red ink across the top. Filed and recorded, Fayette County, September 12, 1978. She read the first line out loud, slow, the way she'd have read a hymn number to a room that couldn't see the board. "Declaration of Trust," she said. "Grantors, Harlan J. Pruitt and Earl W. Voss." "Keep going," Earl said. His voice had gone rough. She kept going. 40 acres, description running in surveyor's language, meets and bounds, a bearing and a distance and a stake, over and over, closing back on itself the way those descriptions always did. And near the bottom, a line that made her stop. "Trustee upon the death or incapacity of either grantor," she read, "shall be Louise A. Pruitt." She looked up at Earl. "He put my name in this. In 1978, I was 40. He put your name in it because he trusted you before you'd have trusted yourself," Earl said. "That's the kind of man he was, Louise. Quiet about the wrong things and dead certain about the right ones." She held the deed against her chest a second, the way she'd held the first ledger, and then she set it down, careful on the workbench, and reached for the metal document box. Inside lay a survey map, folded soft along its creases, the 40 acres shaded in pencil, the rail spur marked in a thin dotted line running straight through where Dwight's lot backed up against depot ground. "That's the piece Pharaoh wants," Earl said, tapping the map, "that whole shaded section. He's not buying 40 acres of scrub, Louise. He's buying the last flat ground wide enough to run rail cars off Route 9 without blasting through Company Hill. There isn't another piece like it for 6 miles either direction. Dwight said the offer was $1.2 million. To the county, Earl said. For land the county never owned to sell. County's been collecting tax on empty ground for years because nobody told them different. That deed says different. He tapped it again. Once this goes on record proper, in front of people, that offer's got nowhere to land. Not on county ground, not on Dwight's collateral, not on anything but you. Louise sat down on the stool, the deed and both ledgers spread across the bench under the bare bulb, Earl standing over her with his flashlight off now, needing it, and neither of them saying much for a minute, just letting the shape of it settle. 2 weeks, she said finally. 2 weeks from Thursday they sign this whole thing at the courthouse. Dwight wants me to sign a quitclaim on the shed before then, says it's just a formality. It's not a formality, Earl said. It's the last loose thread they need cut before somebody like me stands up in that room and says different. You'd stand up. Louise. Earl looked at her steady. I've been sitting quiet on this 30 years because Harlan asked me to wait for his say-so. I don't need asking twice now that it's you. She drove him home a little after midnight, dropped him at his gravel spur with the hound dog barking proper this time, and came back to a dark house that still smelled faintly of Sherry's hand lotion from the week of the funeral. She didn't sleep much. She sat at her kitchen table with the deed in a fresh dish towel and made a list on the back of an old grocery receipt, the way she'd made lists her whole life when a thing got too big to hold in her head all at once. Call Purnell's office. Ask who represents the county on trust land. Do not sign anything. Do not tell Dwight what's in the shop. Dwight came by the next afternoon anyway, the way he said he would, pulling his truck in behind hers with the hardware store's old logo still on the door panel, faded from years of Piney Ridge sun. Mom. He came in without knocking, same as always, sat down at her table like the chair still belonged to him. You look tired. I'm 74, Dwight. I look my age. He set a folder on the table between them, county seal printed at the top of the first page. I brought the quitclaim. Purnell drew it up clean. Won't take you 5 minutes. I told you I'd think about it. There's nothing to think about. He pushed the folder an inch closer, like proximity might do the convincing his words weren't doing. Mom, I've got $110,000 borrowed against that lot already. Pharaoh's bank wants clean title before they release a dime of the sale money. If your shed survey line is muddy, they can hold the whole closing till it's fixed, and I don't have room to wait. I've got payments due whether this closes or not. $110,000, she repeated. You borrowed that much against a lot you don't fully own yet. I own the store, Mom. The lot's collateral. That's how business works. Her phone buzzed on the counter before she could answer him. Sherry's name on the screen. She let it ring through to voicemail. Then it buzzed again right away, same name, and she picked it up this time because 2 calls in a row from Sherry meant something had gone sideways somewhere. Mom, is Dwight there? Sherry's voice came out fast, thin. I need him to look at something. The condo people are saying my deposit's non-refundable past July 15th. That's in 9 days. If this depot money doesn't move by then, I lose $12,000 flat. Louise looked at Dwight across the table, the folder sitting between them, the seal on the front page catching the kitchen light. Sherry, she said into the phone, calm as she could make it. I'm going to call you back. She set the phone down. Dwight was watching her now with a different look than he'd walked in with, something uncertain starting behind his eyes. Mom, what's going on? I'm not signing anything today, Louise said. Not the quitclaim, not anything with Pharaoh's name near it. Why not? She thought about the deed folded in the dish towel in her bedroom closet, about Earl standing in the workshop with his flashlight off, about a note taped inside a door that had told her to count every board. Because your father left me something in that shed, she said, and until I understand all of it, I'm not signing my name to a single piece of paper that touches that ground. Dwight sat back slow, the folder still under his hand, and for the first time since she'd handed him coffee 3 weeks after the funeral, he looked at his mother like he wasn't sure what she knew. Dwight didn't push again. He sat there with the folder half open, tapping one corner against the table like he was counting out a rhythm. What did Dad leave you? He said finally. In the shed. I'm still finding out. That's not an answer, Mom. It's the only one I've got right now. She stood up, refilled her coffee she hadn't touched, mostly to have something to do with her hands. You said Pharaoh's bank wants clean title in 2 weeks. 14 days. Yeah. Then you've got 14 days to wait on me, same as everybody else. He left without the folder signed, without much of anything signed, and she watched his taillight swing out onto Depot Street through the kitchen window, red going small against the gray hill. She called Sherry back like she'd promised. It went to voicemail. She didn't try again. The next morning she called Earl before she'd even finished her eggs. "I want to see the recorder's office," she said. "Today, if you'll ride with me, Fayette County Courthouse." Earl's voice had the sound of a man already reaching for his coat. "I haven't set foot in that building since they made me get a new driver's license in '96. You don't need a license to sit in my truck, Earl. Be ready in 20 minutes. The courthouse sat on the square in Oak Hill. Red brick gone the color of old brick dust. A Civil War cannon out front pointed at nothing in particular. Louise parked crooked in a space too narrow for the truck and didn't care. She carried the deed in a manila folder now. Not a dish towel, Earl's idea. Said a dish towel made a woman look like she didn't trust her own paper. The recorder's office sat at the end of a hall that smelled like floor wax and old radiators. A woman behind the counter had a nameplate that read B. Talbot, Deputy Recorder. Reading glasses pushed up into gray hair. A coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Grandma." "I need to confirm something's on file," Louise said, and slid the folder across. A trust deed, recorded 1978, September 12th. Talbot took the folder without hurry, the way people do a job they've done 30 years. She read the first page, then flipped to the recording stamp, then looked up at Louise over the glasses. "You're Louise Pruitt." "Yes." Harlan's wife. Widow now, 3 weeks. Something in Talbot's face softened, then went careful again. The look of somebody remembering she still worked for the county and not for sympathy. "Give me a minute," she said, and disappeared through a door marked Archives. She was gone longer than a minute. 10, maybe 12. Earl sat in a plastic chair against the wall, hands folded over his cane, not saying much, just watching the door she'd gone through. Louise stood at the counter because sitting felt like giving up ground she wasn't ready to give. Talbot came back with a thin folder of her own, county green, a little dust on the corner like it hadn't been pulled in years. "It's on record," she said. "Book 214, page 88. Never been released, never been challenged, never had so much as an amendment filed against it since the day it went in." She set the county folder down next to Louise's. "I'll tell you something else, though, since you came in asking." "What's that?" "Somebody already pulled a title search on that parcel. 6 weeks back." Talbot tapped the log sheet clipped inside the green folder. "Request came through a law firm out of Charleston, Faro Developments Counsel. They ran the chain of title clean back to 1940, found the tax records, found the lien." She looked at Louise steady. "They never found this deed." "How does a law firm miss something sitting in your own book?" Earl said from his chair. "Because it's indexed under the grantor's names, not the parcel," Talbot said. "Voss and Pruitt. Anybody searching by parcel number alone, all they see is county tax records going back to the 70s showing an unpaid lien and no clear owner. Looks like abandoned ground with a debt on it. That's exactly what somebody wants it to look like, if they're hoping to buy it cheap off the county instead of paying 2 people for it." Louise felt the words settle into her slow, like water finding the low part of a field. "So the county's been fixing to sell land it never owned," she said. "County's been sitting on tax debt for 40 years without anybody telling them different," Talbot said. "That's not the same as owning it. But if nobody stands up and says otherwise before that commission meeting, the county attorney signs off on a sale like it's theirs to make, and untangling it after costs everybody a lot more than it would to just say so now." 2 weeks from Thursday," Louise said. "That's when I hear it's happening. Yes." Talbot made 2 certified copies of the deed on a machine that rattled and steamed like it resented the work, stamped each one with a raised seal, slid them across the counter. "You'll want these in hand," she said. "Not photographs on a phone. Paper, in front of people, is the only thing that stops a room." Outside, the July heat sat heavy on the square, cicadas going somewhere in the courthouse elms. Earl worked his way down the steps one at a time, cane first, and stopped at the bottom to catch his breath. "Talbot's right about one thing," he said. "Paper in a room. That's the only thing Harlan ever trusted to stop somebody." "Earl." Louise stood beside him, the certified copies in her hand, warm from the machine still. Why didn't he just tell me all this while he was alive? Sick as he was those last 2 years, he had time. Earl was quiet a minute, looking off toward the cannon, its barrel green with age. I asked him that myself, he said, near the end. He told me if he'd handed it to you outright, you'd have spent the last years of his life managing it instead of just being married to him. Said he wanted one more thing that was only yours to find, not something he made you carry before you had to. He looked at her. Whether that was right of him, I couldn't say, but that's the reason he gave me. Louise didn't answer that. She folded the copies back into the manila folder and held them against her chest the whole walk to the truck, the way she'd carried nothing else in 40 years quite so careful. They were most of the way back to Piney Ridge, the water tower just coming into view over the tree line, when Louise's phone rang from the cup holder. Not Dwight, not Sherry. A Charleston area code she didn't know. She let Earl answer it since her hands were on the wheel. He put it to his ear, listened, and his face changed in a way she didn't like. "Who is this?" he said. Then, "She's driving. You can talk to me." A pause. "No? She'll call you back when she's ready, and not before." He ended the call and set the phone back in the cup holder like it had bitten him. "Pharaoh's attorney," he said. "Man named Kasner. Said he understood there might be a survey discrepancy on the workshop parcel and wanted to, quote, resolve it informally before it complicates the signing." Earl shook his head slow. 6 weeks they've had that title search sitting on a desk, Louise, and now all of a sudden they're calling you direct, day after you walk into the recorder's office asking questions. Somebody at that courthouse talks. Somebody always does. Earl looked over at her. That call means one thing plain. They know there's a problem. They just don't know how big it is yet. And they'd rather buy you off quiet than find out in front of the whole county commission. Louise turned onto Depot Street, the workshop's green door coming into view past the porch rail, freshly painted the way she'd kept it every year without fail. She thought about Kastner's voice she'd never heard, some man in a Charleston office with a title search folder 6 weeks old already circling. "Let him call back," she said. "I've got nothing informal left to say to that man." Earl almost smiled at that, the closest thing to it she'd seen from him since the funeral. "Harlan would have liked hearing you say that. Harlan spent 40 years making sure I'd have something worth saying it over." She pulled into the driveway, cut the engine, sat a second with both hands still on the wheel. 2 weeks from Thursday," she said again, like saying it enough times might shrink the distance instead of stretch it. "I want everything out of that safe photographed, copied, and someplace safer than a workshop with a busted lock, Earl, before Kasner or anybody else decides a broken window solves their problem for them." Earl didn't wait for morning. He was back at her kitchen door before 8. A canvas bag over one shoulder, an old Nikon Harlan had given him for Christmas some year neither of them could place anymore. "Batteries still work," he said, holding it up like proof of something. "Figured a phone photo's fine till somebody's lawyer says it isn't." They walked out together, past the porch rail, past the green door Louise had painted every spring for 40 years. The lock hung open on its hasp, the way she'd left it. Inside, the safe still sat open behind the pegboard, dark and square, waiting. Earl knelt slow, joints complaining, and lifted the ledgers out one at a time. He laid them on the workbench under the bare bulb, oldest first, the way a man handles something he already knows is fragile. "Start here," he said, and opened the first cover. The entries ran in Harlan's hand, clean and small, dated month by month starting in 1978. Louise leaned over his shoulder. "Rent received," Earl read. "CP Rail Corp. $175. He turned a page. Same again. And again. "Every month?" "Every month, near as I can tell. Straight through to 1994. He flipped faster now, thumb catching the corners, counting under his breath. 16 years of entries, the same figure most months, sometimes a little more, when the note said late fee, $10. "That's near 200 payments," Earl said. He set the ledger down and did the sum on the back of his hand with a stub of pencil from his shirt pocket. $33,600. Paid in, recorded right here. Louise stared at the column of numbers like they might rearrange themselves into something she could argue with. They didn't. "Paid to who?" she said. "To the trust." Earl tapped the header on the page. "Harlan Pruitt and Earl Voss, trustees." Rail company knew exactly whose ground it was sitting on, paid rent on it for 16 years running. Then why'd it stop? Says right here. Earl turned the last written page. The final entry read, Rail spur decommissioned, September 1994. No further rent due company. Underneath, in different ink, added later, company folded. Successor unknown. Land stands. So somewhere out there, Louise said slow, is a rail company that quit paying and never told anybody they still owed on this ground. Or the county's been quietly deciding 16 years of paid rent doesn't count for anything, long as nobody brings the book in and lays it on a desk. Earl closed the ledger careful, both hands flat on the cover. That's not scrubland with a debt on it, Louise. That's income property somebody let sit. She picked up her phone and started photographing pages, one after another, Earl holding each flat so the flash didn't wash it white. It took the better part of an hour. When they'd finished, he zipped the old ledgers into his canvas bag himself, said he'd rather carry them in his truck than leave them in a shed with a lock that didn't work right. They were still standing in the doorway when a car she didn't know came slow up Depot Street. Black, clean, out of place against the gravel and the weeds. It parked behind her truck. A man got out in a suit too pressed for July, carrying nothing but a phone in his hand. Mrs. Pruitt. He came up the walk easy, like he owned the pace of it. Grant Kasner. I represent Faro Development. We spoke yesterday. Well, I spoke. You didn't, if I recall. I recall it the same way. Louise didn't move off the step. I'll get right to it then, since you're a woman who likes things plain. Kasner's smile didn't move much past his mouth. We're aware there's some kind of paperwork question on this parcel. Old family stuff, probably nothing, but it's slowing down a closing that matters to a lot of people, your son included. My son's business isn't why I own that lock. No, ma'am, it isn't. He glanced past her at the open green door, at Earl standing just inside it with the canvas bag still over his shoulder. Here's what I can offer, informally, $50,000 today for a signed release on any claim to this parcel. No lawyers, no waiting on a county meeting. Clean and quiet for everybody. 50,000, Louise repeated. That's more than fair for a shed with a tax lien on it. It's less than 2 months' rent your client's own predecessor used to pay on this ground, Earl said from the doorway. You want to talk fair? Talk fair. Kasner's eyes went to Earl, then back to Louise, something behind them recalculating. I don't know this gentleman. Earl Voss, Earl said. Trustee of record since 1978. You'd have found that if your title search had known where to look. For the first time since he'd stepped out of the car, Kasner's smile went flat all the way. I'll be honest, Mrs. Pruitt, my client would rather settle this quiet than let it turn into something public. That offer's good through Friday. I don't need till Friday, Louise said. I'm not selling you a claim I never planned to give up. Not for 50,000. Not for 500. Kasner studied her a second, like he was deciding whether she meant it or whether grief was talking. Whatever he decided, he didn't say. He turned back toward his car, then stopped halfway down the walk. There's a commission meeting in 2 weeks, he said. Whatever's in that shed, it either holds up in a public room or it doesn't. I'd think hard about which one you're betting on. I already thought hard, Louise said. That's why I'm still standing here. He drove off the way he'd come, slow, careful, like a man who didn't want to look rattled, pulling out of a gravel drive. Earl watched the car go, then let out a breath he'd been holding since Kasner said the number. $50,000 to make a widow disappear quiet, he said. That tells you what they think that ground's really worth. It tells me they're scared, Louise said. Her phone rang before she'd finished the sentence. Dwight's name on the screen? She answered it standing right there in the yard, Earl beside her. Mom. His voice had a different pitch to it than it had had at her kitchen table. The bank called. They're saying if the Faro closing doesn't happen by the 15th, they're calling the note. All of it. 110,000 due at once. When's the 15th, Dwight? 9 days. A pause. Some sound behind him like he was pacing a room. Mom, whatever's going on with you in that shed, I need it settled. I can't lose the store over a padlock. I'm not the one who borrowed against ground I never asked you to put up as collateral. I didn't know there was a problem with the ground when I signed for it. Neither did I, Dwight, for 40 years. She looked at Earl, at the green door standing open behind them, at the ledger zipped safe in his bag. But I know now. And I'm not signing anything just to keep a bank happy on a schedule your father never agreed to." Dwight didn't answer that for a second. When he did, his voice had gone quieter, less like a man pushing and more like one starting to feel the floor move under him. "What exactly is in that shed, Mom?" "Come to the commission meeting," Louise said. 2 weeks from Thursday. Bring Sherry. You'll both see it same time as everybody else." She ended the call before he could argue it further. Earl was watching her with something close to a smile, the kind he didn't hand out easy. "Harlan used to say the same thing," he said. "Never explain a thing twice to somebody who wasn't listening the first time. He said a lot of things I'm only now finding out he meant." Louise looked back at the workshop, the door still open to the afternoon light, the safe sitting empty of everything but shadow now that the ledgers had gone with Earl. "Photographs are one thing. I want copies made proper, someplace with a machine that doesn't jam every third page." "Library in Oak Hill's got one," Earl said. "And a librarian who won't ask why a 74-year-old woman needs 40 pages of 1978 rent records copied twice. Tomorrow, then." Louise pulled the green door shut behind them and set the padlock back through the hasp, out of habit more than need now. "And Earl, I want to know who else signed anything back when your name went on that deed. Anybody still living who'd remember it plain, in front of people, if somebody asked them straight?" Earl thought about that a minute, canvas bag still over his shoulder, the old Nikon knocking soft against his hip. "There's one," he said. "Woman named Odessa Fitch. Notarized the thing herself back in '78, worked out of the old bank building before it closed. She'd be past 90 now if she's living at all." "Find out," Louise said, "before 2 weeks from Thursday turns into the only day left to ask." Oak Hill's library sat 2 blocks off the highway, a squat brick building with a flag out front and a copier older than Dwight. The librarian was younger than Louise expected, maybe 30, glasses pushed up in her hair. 40 pages, Earl told her, 2 copies each, and she needs them today. Machine jams on legal size, the librarian said. "I'll feed it by hand." It took most of an hour. Louise stood at the librarian's elbow the whole time, watching each page come through warm, watching Harlan's small, clean handwriting appear twice over instead of once. When it was done, the librarian slid both stacks into folders without being asked. "None of my business," she said, "but whatever this is, you might want a safe deposit box, not just a truck." "That's the plan," Louise said. She rented one that same afternoon at the bank in Oak Hill, paid the $11 for it herself, out of her own purse, not Harlan's account and not Dwight's store. It felt right to pay for it plain, with her own money for once. Earl found Odessa Fitch 2 days later. He came by the house at supper time, still in his work boots, and stood at the screen door instead of coming in. "She's alive," he said. 91, lives with her granddaughter out past Clendenin. She remember any of it? "Sharp as a tack," her granddaughter says. "Sharper than me most days." He turned his cap in his hands. "She'll see us Saturday morning." Said bring the deed, not just talk about it. Odessa Fitch's granddaughter's house sat back off a gravel road, a ramp built onto the porch, wind chimes going soft in the heat. Odessa herself sat in a wheelchair by the window, a crocheted blanket over her knees despite the July warmth, eyes clear and quick behind thick glasses. "Earl Voss," she said, before he'd said a word. "You still owe me for the coffee I bought you in 1979. "I'll settle up," Earl said, and something in his face loosened, the way it hadn't since the funeral. Louise laid the certified deed copy on the little table by Odessa's chair. The old woman didn't reach for it right away. She looked at Louise first, a long, measuring look. "You're Harlan's wife." "I am. He came into my office that January," Odessa said. 1978. Cold as anything, snow still on the ground. Brought this Voss boy with him. She nodded at Earl. "Wasn't a boy then either, but he was younger than he is now, same as all of us." "You remember the deed itself," Louise said, "not just the day. I notarized 400 documents that year, Mrs. Pruitt. I don't remember most of them." Odessa picked up the copy at last, held it close to her glasses. "I remember this one because your husband made me read a clause back to him 3 times before he'd sign it." "Which clause?" Odessa found it with a finger gone thin and spotted with age, tapped the page. "Right here. Trust remains valid so long as the structure on the parcel is maintained in good repair by the trustees or their heirs." He asked me what happened if the building fell down. I told him, plain as I'm telling you, the trust could be challenged and maybe voided if the county could show the property'd gone to ruin and nobody cared for it. She looked up. He didn't like that answer. Made me read it a third time like it might change. Louise felt something settle into place, quiet and total, like a lock turning. That's why he painted the door, she said, mostly to herself. Every year, even sick, even when he couldn't hardly lift the brush, man kept a shed looking cared for 40 years, and never let his own wife pass the threshold, Odessa said. That's not neglect, Mrs. Pruitt. That's a man protecting something he was scared to explain. Scared of what? Same thing most men are scared of, being wrong out loud in front of the person whose opinion he wanted most. Odessa handed the deed back. He asked me once, right after he signed, whether a woman's name could go on a trust like this, same as a man's. I told him it could. He said good. Said he intended to fix that eventually. She looked at Louise over the glasses. Eventually took him a while, looks like. Louise folded the deed back into its folder, hand steadier than she expected. Will you say all that in front of the county commission, she said. 2 weeks from Thursday. Wheel me up to the podium yourself, Odessa said. I notarized it. I'll defend it. They were most of the way home, Earl driving this time so Louise could hold the folders flat on her lap, when her phone buzzed with a text from Sherry. 3 words, no punctuation to soften them. We need talk. Sherry was waiting on the porch when they pulled in, sitting on the top step in flip-flops, her rental car nosed in behind Louise's truck like she'd been there a while. Mom. She stood when Louise got out. Dwight said you're telling people there's some kind of deed on the workshop. There's a deed, Louise said, not people. Earl, the recorder's office, a notary who signed it in 1978? That's not possible. Sherry's voice climbed a notch. The title search came back clean. Farrow's lawyers looked at everything. They looked at the county records, Louise said. Not at my safe. Sherry's eyes went past her to Earl, to the folders in Louise's arms, and something in her face shifted from annoyed to frightened in the space of a breath. Mom, I put a deposit down, $12,000, on the condo. It's non-refundable after the 15th. I know what a non-refundable deposit is, Sherry. I raised you. Then you know what it means if this closing falls apart. Sherry's hands were shaking a little, and she pressed them flat against her shorts like that might stop it. I don't have another $12,000. I spent the house money already. First and last on a rental till the condo's ready. Moving costs. Ricky's boat slip. You bought your husband a boat slip with the money from your father's house. That's not the point right now. Sherry's voice cracked, just slightly, on right now. The point is, if you stand up at that meeting with some old paper and it stops the sale, I lose that deposit. $12,000, Mom, gone. Because you wanted to prove something about a shed. Louise set the folders down on the porch rail, careful, before she answered that. I'm not proving anything about a shed, she said. I'm proving your father owned 40 acres nobody knew he owned, and put my name on it same as his, so I'd have something when he was gone. He put $110,000 of Dwight's loan on that land too, Sherry said. You going to stand up and take that away from your own son to prove a point? I'm not taking anything from Dwight that was ever his to lose, Louise said. He borrowed against ground that was never the bank's to count as collateral in the first place. That's not me taking it. That's the truth catching up to a mistake he made without asking me. Sherry stood there a second, arms wrapped around herself despite the heat, looking for a moment less like a woman fighting over a condo and more like a girl who used to sit on this same step, waiting for her father to come in from the shop. I don't want to lose the deposit, she said, quieter now. That's all. I'm not trying to be cruel about it. I know you're not trying to be, Louise said. But you divided up everything in that kitchen 3 weeks after we buried him, and you didn't leave room to ask if I was trying to be cruel either. Just handed me a key and figured that was fair. Sherry didn't have an answer for that. She looked down at her flip-flops, at the porch boards Harlan had replaced himself some summer years back, and when she looked up again, her eyes were wet. Is it really worth that much? She asked. The land? I don't rightly know yet, Louise said, but I know it's worth more than a shed with a busted lock, and more than $50,000 some Charleston lawyer offered me to sign it away quiet. Somebody offered you $50,000? Tuesday. Stood right where you're standing. Sherry's face went through something complicated, calculation and shame arriving at close to the same moment. And you said no. I said no. Sherry picked up her keys off the porch rail where she'd set them, turned them over once in her hand. I have to go, she said. Ricky's expecting me to call about the closing costs. She got halfway to her car, then stopped, looked back. The meeting's still 2 weeks from Thursday? Same as I told Dwight. I'll be there, Sherry said, and there wasn't any fight left in her voice when she said it, just something quieter, closer to worry. I want to see whatever it is myself, before somebody else tells me what to think about it. She drove off slower than Kasner had, gravel crunching soft under the tires instead of spitting behind them. Earl watched from the bottom of the steps, canvas bag still over one shoulder out of habit now, like he didn't trust anywhere else to hold it. That girl's scared, he said. Not greedy, scared. I know it. Louise picked the folders back up off the rail. Scared people say cruel things faster than greedy ones do. Doesn't make it not cruel, just makes it easier to forgive someday if she asks right. You gonna forgive her before the meeting or after? After, Louise said. Once I know she came for the truth and not just to see if I'd fold before Thursday. She looked out at the road where the dust was still settling behind Sherry's car. Come on in, Earl. I want you to help me read through Odessa's clause again, line by line before we go one step further. If that building has to be kept up for the trust to hold, I want to know exactly what good repair means to a county commission, and whether a shed with a padlock and a fresh coat of paint every spring is going to be enough to satisfy them. Earl set the folder on the kitchen table and spread out the pages, corner to corner, weighing them down with a coffee mug on one side and the sugar bowl on the other. Louise sat across from him, reading glasses pushed up her nose, Odessa's copy right in the center where they both could see it. Read it again, Louise said. Slow this time. Earl found the line with his finger. Trust remains valid so long as the structure on the parcel is maintained in good repair by the trustees or their heirs. He looked up. That's the whole clause. No definition of good repair anywhere else in the document. So it's whatever a commission says it is, or whatever a judge says it is, if it ever gets that far. Earl leaned back in his chair. Roof's tight, doors painted, floors solid enough to hold a floor safe without sinking. That's more than good repair for a building that old. Sherry called it a shed with a busted lock. Lock ain't busted. Lock's just old. Earl tapped the page again, but somebody looking to break this trust is going to go looking for anything that reads like neglect. Tax lien's the first place they'll point. Louise took her glasses off, set them on the table. $2,200. That's what the county's got on record. Been sitting 3 years, near as I can tell from what we pulled at the courthouse. If a lawyer stands up at that meeting and says the county's owed money on a building nobody's maintained enough to pay taxes on, that's a way in. Even if the roof's tight. It's a way in, Earl agreed. Don't mean it's a way through. But I wouldn't hand it to them free. Louise got up without answering, went down the hall to the bedroom closet, and came back with the tin box. She set it on the table next to the ledgers, lifted the lid. The bills inside were old, rubber-banded in stacks, corners soft from 40 years folded flat under a floorboard. Harlan kept this here for something, she said. I didn't know what, till now. Earl counted it out with her, careful, the way you'd count money that had waited a long time to be spent. $2,640 in 10s and 20s gone soft as cloth. That'll cover the lien with room left over, Earl said. Then that's what it's for. Louise put the bills back in neat stacks. Tomorrow morning, first thing, we're driving to the county tax office and paying that lien in full. I want a receipt in my hand before anybody else gets a chance to use it against me. The county tax office sat 2 doors down from the recorders, same brick, same tired blue carpet. The clerk behind the counter was heavy-set, patient-looking, a coffee mug shaped like a pumpkin sitting by her keyboard, even though it was July. Parcel number? She asked. Louise read it off the deed copy. The clerk typed, waited, frowned a little at the screen. Leon's here, she said. $2,200 plus accrued interest. Comes to $2,380 this month. I'll pay it in cash, Louise said. The clerk looked up at that, glanced at Earl, then back to Louise. Don't get many cash payments this size anymore. She said it kindly, not suspicious, just tired in the way of someone who'd seen every kind of person come through that counter. It's been saved up a long time, Louise said. The clerk counted it twice, printed the receipt, stamped it, and slid it across the counter. Parcel's clear as of today, she said. That'll show updated in the system by Monday. Louise folded the receipt into the folder with the deed copies, tucked it flat against Harlan's handwriting like it belonged there. Thank you, she said. You don't know what that paper's worth to me. Ma'am, at this counter, paper's usually all anybody's got that matters. The clerk smiled, small and real. Good luck with whatever it's for. They were back in the truck, receipt safe in Louise's lap, when Earl's phone rang. He answered it on speaker without thinking, the way old men do who never learn to mind their volume. Voss, a woman's voice, clipped, official. This is Patricia Hale, County Clerk's office. I'm calling about the commission meeting request filed under Pruitt. That's me, Louise said, leaning toward the phone. Louise Pruitt. Mrs. Pruitt, good. I wanted to let you know a second party filed a motion this morning. A Mr. Roy Kasner, representing Cardinal Ridge Development. He's asking the commission to move the land matter to executive session instead of open floor. Louise felt something go cold and quick down through her chest. Closed doors, that's the request, yes. Says it involves proprietary business information and a pending transaction. It involves my husband's name on a deed, Louise said. That's not proprietary, that's public record, same as the one you've got sitting in your own office right now. I understand, ma'am. The commission chair will rule on the motion at the start of the meeting. I'm just required to notify all listed parties in advance. When do they rule? Same night, before public comment opens. Louise closed her eyes a second, the truck idling under her, heat coming up off the tax office parking lot in waves. Thank you for calling, she said, and Patricia Hale hung up polite and quick, like a woman glad to be done with an awkward errand. Earl set the phone in the console. They're trying to close the room before you ever get the floor. They are. Louise stared out the windshield at the courthouse steps, at an old man feeding pigeons that had no business being fed in July heat. If that motion passes, I stand there with a deed and a set of ledgers, and nobody in the county but 7 commissioners ever hears a word of it. And Kasner walks it straight into a private settlement, Earl said. No public record, no Odessa on a podium, just numbers moving quiet between lawyers. That's exactly what he wants. Louise put the truck in reverse, backed out slow, temper riding just under her voice instead of on top of it, so we don't let it get to a vote on his terms. How do you stop a motion you don't have a vote on? I don't stop it, Louise said. I make it not matter. If the paper's already public before that meeting starts, there's nothing left in that room worth closing the doors over. Earl looked at her sideways. You thinking newspaper. I'm thinking the Gazette Mail still runs a courthouse notices column, and I'm thinking Odessa Fitch has a granddaughter who works for a television station out of Charleston, and I'm thinking a recorded deed and a paid-off lien and a notary who'll go on camera don't need 7 commissioners' permission to be true. Louise turned onto the highway, hands steady on the wheel. They can close whatever room they want, Earl. They can't close what's already been said out loud. Earl was quiet a minute, watching the fields go by, tobacco barns leaning gray against the tree line. Harlan'd have liked watching you do this, he said finally. He always did like it when the numbers came out even. They're not even yet. No, Earl said, but they're closer than they were 3 weeks ago. Dwight called that evening, right around supper, same as he had every evening since the bank's letter. Louise let it ring twice before she answered, standing at the counter with the phone in one hand and a dish towel in the other. Mom, the bank moved the date up. His voice had an edge worn thin from 3 weeks of it. They're saying the 12th now, not the 15th. Somebody flagged the account for review. Somebody meaning who? I don't know. The loan officer wouldn't say. Just said corporate compliance wanted it resolved sooner. A pause, breath ragged on the other end. Mom, that's 6 days, not 9. Louise set the dish towel down slow. Kasner's trying to squeeze the calendar from both ends, she said, half to Dwight, half to herself. Push your bank up, push the meeting closed. Corner me before I've got a room to stand in. Whose calendar? Mom, I don't understand half of what you're saying anymore. You will Thursday, Louise said. 2 weeks from Thursday, same as I told you. Come early, bring Sherry. And Dwight, don't sign one more paper for that man before then. Not one page, no matter what he calls it or how friendly he sounds asking. He's not going to just let the note ride, Mom. I'm not asking him to let it ride, Louise said. I'm asking you to hold 6 days the way I've held 40 years. You can manage 6 days, Dwight. I know you can. He didn't answer right away, and when he did, his voice had dropped the argument out of it, left something rawer underneath. I don't know what I'm supposed to be scared of anymore, he said. You or the bank. Be scared of neither, Louise said. Be ready instead. There's a difference, and your father spent 40 years teaching me it, one padlock at a time. She hung up before he could ask what that meant. Outside the kitchen window, the light was going long and gold over the yard, the workshop's green door catching the last of it, brass lock bright where she'd polished it that spring without knowing yet what it had been guarding. Earl's truck sat in the drive where he'd left it, waiting on tomorrow's errands, the ledgers already boxed for the drive to Charleston in the morning. 6 days to a bank deadline. 9 days to a commission meeting that somebody wanted held behind closed doors. Louise dried her hands on the towel, folded it over the oven handle, and went to find her good shoes. Whatever days were left, she intended to spend every one of them moving, not waiting. Odessa Fitch lived in a duplex on Maple Avenue, the kind with a ramp built onto the porch and a hummingbird feeder swinging by the door. She was 91 and sharp as a tack, according to Earl, who'd known her since she notarized his own deed back in '79. She answered on the second knock, cane in one hand, reading glasses pushed up into white hair. Earl Voss, she said, you still owe me a pie from 1983. I remember, Earl said. This here's Louise Pruitt, Harlan's widow. Odessa's face changed at that, went careful and warm at once. I wondered when somebody'd come asking about that trust, she said. Come in out of the heat. Her front room smelled like coffee and cedar. She sat them down, poured tea nobody had asked for, and looked at the folder Louise set on the table like she already knew what was in it. 1978, Odessa said. Harlan Pruitt came into my office in March, alone. Told me he wanted his wife's name on 40 acres, permanent. No way for anybody to undo it later. Why alone? Louise asked. Why not tell me? He said you'd try to talk him out of spending the notary fee. Odessa smiled at that, small and dry. $6 back then. He paid it twice in case the first one didn't take. Louise's hand went still around her cup. He said one more thing, Odessa went on. Said his own father lost a farm to a bank that changed its mind about a handshake. Said paper was the only thing that couldn't change its mind. That sounds like him, Louise said, quiet. I recorded it myself, Odessa said. Walked it to the courthouse the same afternoon. I don't forget documents I carry with my own 2 hands. Earl leaned forward. Odessa, we need more than memory now. Roy Kasner's filed to close the county meeting, wants it heard behind doors. Odessa's mouth went tight at Kasner's name. That man came around here in June, she said, asking if I recalled the Pruitt filing. Asked real polite if my memory mightn't be a little foggy after all these years. What did you tell him? Louise asked. I told him my memory's sharper than his manners. Odessa set her cup down hard enough to rattle the saucer. He didn't like that answer. We need you willing to say all this out loud, Louise said, in front of people. Before that meeting, if we can manage it. My granddaughter Renee works the evening desk at a station out of Charleston, Odessa said. She's been asking me for a family story for 2 years. I always told her no such thing existed. She looked at Louise steady. Looks like I was wrong. Would she run it before the 12th? Louise asked. Banks moved a deadline on my son. County's trying to close a meeting 9 days out. I don't have much room left. She'll run it the day after I call her, Odessa said. Renee doesn't sit on a good story. Comes by it honest. Her grandfather covered courthouse notices for the Gazette Mail 30 years. Louise felt something loosen in her chest for the first time in 3 weeks. There's one more thing you should see, Louise said, and slid the ledger across the table, open to the page with the small looping initials in the margin. E.V. Earl confirmed those are his own hand. But there's another mark further back before Earl's that neither of us recognize. Odessa put her glasses on, studied the page a long moment. That's Franklin Teague, she said finally, county surveyor, back when the depot still ran freight. He walked that boundary line with Harlan in '77, year before I ever drew the deed. Is he still around? Earl asked. He's buried in the Baptist churchyard, same as most everybody who knew the truth of that ground before you two started digging. Odessa closed the ledger gentle, like it was something living. But his survey's on file at the courthouse. Recorded right alongside the deed. You want it? It's there. Louise looked at Earl. Another name, another thread pulling tight instead of loose. Franklin Teague, she said. That's who set the boundary before it was ever mine to lose. Man was honest to a fault, Odessa said, which is why Harlan trusted him to walk it. They left 20 minutes later with Odessa's promise ringing behind them, and Renee's number written on the back of a grocery receipt in Louise's purse. Earl backed the truck out slow, looked over at Louise once they'd cleared the drive. That's 2 fronts now, he said. Paper in the recorder's office, story on the television. Kastner's going to feel that squeeze before he ever walks into that meeting. Good, Louise said. Let him feel something besides comfortable. Her phone rang before they'd gone 2 miles. Dwight's name on the screen, and something in the ring itself sounded different. Faster somehow, like he'd hit the call button before he'd finished deciding to. Mom. His voice was tight. Kastner came by the shop just now. What did he want? Papers. Said the bank needs a personal guarantee added to the note on account of the account flag. Said if I sign today, he can get the review lifted. Keep the 12th from turning into something worse. Louise's stomach dropped, quick and cold. Did you sign it? A pause, long enough to answer on its own. Not yet. He's still standing here. Dwight, listen to me. Louise gripped the phone with both hands. A personal guarantee means your house, your truck, everything you own outside that shop. Not just the business anymore. You. He said it was routine. Nothing about that man is routine. Louise heard her own voice shake and let it. Put him on the phone. There was a shuffle, low voices, and then Kastner's, smooth as always. Mrs. Pruitt. Good afternoon. You walked into my son's shop and asked him to sign away his house on a Tuesday afternoon, Louise said, without his mother, without a lawyer, without one day to think it over. Time's the one thing none of us have much of, Mrs. Pruitt. Kastner's tone didn't change at all. The bank set the date. I'm just the messenger trying to keep your son's business breathing. You're the reason the bank moved the date, Louise said. Don't stand in my son's shop and call yourself a messenger. Silence on the line, just a beat too long. You've got quite an imagination, Kastner said finally. I've got a recorded deed and a survey filed the year before it, Louise said. And a woman in Charleston who's about to tell the whole state what's really sitting under that depot ground. You go on and see how much imagination that takes. She hung up before he could answer, hands not quite steady, and looked over at Earl. He's scared, Earl said. Man doesn't visit a hardware store himself unless the walls are closing in some. Then we close them faster. Louise looked out at the road, tobacco fields giving way to the first fence posts of Piney Ridge proper. Called Dwight back. Tell him not to sign one word till I'm standing next to him. You think he'll listen? I think Sherry already told him what a $12,000 mistake feels like, Louise said. Dwight's smarter than he lets Kastner believe. He's just been scared alone too long to notice it. She reached for the folder in her lap, the survey record and the affidavit both still to be filed, and held it like something that had finally started pulling its own weight. That ends this week. Dwight's shop still had the lights on when they pulled up. The open sign flipped to closed, but nobody bothering to lock the glass door behind it. Kastner's car sat out front, dark blue, a rental sticker still on the bumper. Louise didn't wait for Earl to cut the engine. She walked straight in, folder under her arm, Earl a step behind her. Dwight stood at the counter, pen in hand, papers spread out under the register light. Kastner stood across from him, tie loosened, looking pleased with himself in a way that made Louise's jaw tighten. Put the pen down, Dwight, Louise said. Dwight looked up, startled, guilty as a boy caught at the cookie jar. Mom, I was just, put it down. He set it down. Kastner straightened, smoothed his tie like that fixed anything. Mrs. Pruitt, we were just finishing up a routine amendment. Nothing you do is routine. Louise stepped up to the counter, set the folder down flat, right on top of his papers. You want to talk business, you talk it in front of me, not behind my son's back on a Tuesday. This doesn't concern you legally. It concerns my name on a deed you don't know exists yet. Louise opened the folder, slid the recorded copy across so it sat square in front of him, read the parcel number. Kastner's eyes moved over it. Something flickered there, quick, gone almost as fast as it came. He was good, but not that good. "This is a filing error," he said. "Old paperwork. Superseded." "Nothing supersedes a recorded trust," Earl said. "You know that better than any of us, Mr. Kastner. You've read every deed in that courthouse twice." Kastner didn't answer that. He looked at Dwight instead. "We can revisit the guarantee language. No rush." "There's a rush," Louise said. "There's a bank date and a meeting date, and you moved both of them like a man juggling knives he thinks nobody sees." She turned to Dwight. "Did he tell you the shop's not even his to leverage? Did he tell you whose ground that lot sits on?" Dwight looked between them, pale. "Mom, what's going on?" "What deed?" "Come by the house tonight," Louise said. "I'll show you paper instead of telling you words. Words haven't done either of us much good lately." Kastner gathered his own papers slow, unhurried, a man trying to look like nothing had touched him. "I'll have our attorneys review the filing," he said. "If it's legitimate, Cardinal Ridge will want to discuss it directly, privately." "You already tried private," Louise said. "County clerk called about your motion this afternoon. That landed." She saw it land, saw the muscle work once in his jaw before he smoothed it flat again. "Good evening, Mrs. Pruitt," he said, and walked out past her, past Earl, out to his rental car, glowing blue under the streetlight. Dwight watched the door swing shut behind him, then looked at his mother like he'd never quite seen her before. "Mom, what is going on?" "Sit down," Louise said. "I'll tell you the parts I know." She told him, standing at his own counter, papers still scattered where Kastner left them, the workshop, the floorboard, the safe behind the pegboard, Odessa Fitch and a notary fee paid twice, Franklin Teague and a survey older than Dwight himself. Dwight didn't say much. He listened, hands flat on the counter, knuckles going white and easing, like a man riding out a wave he didn't see coming. "Dad never told me any of it," he said finally. "Dad never told anybody," Louise said. "That was the whole point." "Why not?" "Because paper can't be talked out of anything," Louise said. "People can. He learned that from his own father losing ground to a bank's good word. He wasn't going to lose ours to a good word either. Not even mine, apparently." She almost smiled, tired and thin. He trusted the lock more than he trusted conversation. Dwight rubbed his face with both hands. "I put the shop up for a loan on land that was already yours. You didn't know that. Doesn't make it feel better." "No," Louise said, "but it makes it fixable. Kastner built a deal on ground he never actually secured. That's on him now, not you. You just have to stop signing." Dwight looked at the papers still spread under the counter light, at his own name half filled in on a line that would have put his house behind a bank's patience. He gathered them up, slow, and set them in the trash can by the register. "I'm done signing anything that man hands me," he said. "Good," Louise said. "Now come Thursday, and bring your sister if she'll come. She won't like hearing any of this." "She doesn't have to like it," Louise said. "She just has to hear it before somebody else tells her a version that isn't true." The Franklin Teague survey turned up 2 days later, tucked in a records box in the courthouse basement, sleeves gone brittle with age. The clerk who found it, a young man named Corey with a ring of keys the size of a fist, laid it out on the counter careful, like it might crumble if he breathed wrong. "Whole depot tract," Corey said, tracing a finger along the faded boundary line. 41 acres, not 40. Looks like there was a strip along the creek nobody ever subdivided off." Louise leaned in close. "That strip run under the depot building itself runs right under the loading platform," Corey said. "According to this anyway." Earl let out a low breath. "That's the acre Cardinal Ridge already poured concrete footers on for their access road. They built on land that's inside the trust," Louise said, and something in her chest went tight and bright at once. Fear and something close to triumph tangled together, not beside it. "Inside it. That'll matter to the county," Corey said. "That'll matter a lot." Odessa's granddaughter Renee called that same evening, voice quick and warm over the phone. "Grandma told me everything," she said. "I want to run it Thursday night, 6 o'clock slot. I need you on camera, Mrs. Pruitt, if you're willing." "I'm willing," Louise said, and meant it more than she'd meant anything in 3 weeks. "I'll need the deed copy, the lien receipt, and anything else you've got that shows the paper trail clean." "I've got a whole folder," Louise said. "It's getting heavier every day." Thursday night, 6 o'clock, Louise sat in her own front room with Earl beside her and a camera light too bright in her eyes, and told Renee Fitch the whole of it, plain and unhurried, the way Harlan would have wanted numbers told. No embellishment, just the deed, the dates, the lien paid in cash, the survey that put 41 acres under a trust nobody but a dead man's writing had remembered. It ran that night at 6 and again at 11, and by morning half of Piney Ridge had seen it once, and the other half had heard about it twice. Louise's phone hadn't stopped ringing since. Sherry called at 8 the next morning, before Louise had her coffee poured. Her voice came out flat, scared under the anger. "Mom, what did you do?" "I told the truth," Louise said. "On television, since nobody around here believes it in person. Do you know what people are saying? Dwight called me crying." "Crying, Mom?" "Good," Louise said. "Means he's finally awake. I put $9,000 down on that condo." Sherry's voice cracked on the number. "Non-refundable, past the 60th day. If this shop deal falls apart because of some old ledger you found in a shed." "It's not some old ledger," Louise said. "It's your father's name, recorded at the courthouse in 1978. Silence on the line. Long enough, Louise thought the call had dropped. "Come to supper tonight," Louise said. "Bring your own eyes. Don't bring your fear." Sherry came at 6, arms crossed before she even got out of the car. She stood in the kitchen doorway like she expected a trap. "Show me," she said. "All of it." Louise laid it out on the table, same as she had for Dwight. The deed, the survey, Odessa's name, Earl's initials in the margin. Sherry read every page twice, lips moving, color draining slow out of her face. 41 acres, she said finally, under the depot, under the road they already poured. That's right, Dad never said one word. He said it in ink, Louise said, just never out loud. Sherry sat down hard in a kitchen chair, folder still open in front of her. "I already told the condo people I'd close in 3 weeks. "Then you've got a decision to make," Louise said. "Same as your brother did. This isn't fair, Mom. You get a shed nobody wanted and it turns into a gold mine. I get a house and it turns into a hole I can't climb out of. Nobody planned that," Louise said. "Your father planned to protect this ground. That's all he was doing. He wasn't picking favorites from a grave." Sherry didn't answer that. She just stared at the deed like it might change its mind if she looked long enough. The bank notice came Friday morning, thick envelope, Cardinal Ridge Savings letterhead stamped across the top. Dwight brought it over himself, hands not quite steady when he set it on Louise's table. "They're calling the loan," he said. "Due in full, 5 days." Louise opened it slow. Balance due, $22,000, deadline printed bold at the bottom. Her stomach dropped, but her hands stayed calm, folding the letter back along its crease. "They're panicking," Earl said, reading over her shoulder. "Banks don't call loans due in 5 days unless somebody upstairs is running scared." "Kasner," Louise said. "Kasner," Earl agreed. "Man's trying to collapse the whole thing before that meeting Tuesday. Force Dwight into default so there's nothing left to argue over." Dwight's face had gone pale under his beard. "I don't have $22,000 sitting around, Mom." "You don't need it," Louise said. "Not if the collateral was never valid to begin with." The phone rang before Dwight could answer. Louise picked it up, and a woman's voice, brisk and official, introduced herself as Patricia Combs from the county clerk's office. No relation to Sherry's married name. Just a coincidence Louise didn't have room to dwell on. "Mrs. Pruitt, I wanted you to hear it from us directly," Patricia said. "The commission voted this morning. Mr. Kasner's motion to close Tuesday's meeting was denied." Louise's breath went out slow. "Denied on what grounds?" "Public interest," Patricia said. "Given the television coverage this week, 3 commissioners said closing it would look like exactly what people already suspect. The meeting stays open. 6 o'clock Tuesday, Courthouse Annex." "Thank you," Louise said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. She hung up and looked at Earl, then at Dwight. "Meeting's staying open," she said. "Kasner lost that fight before he even got there. Doesn't mean he's done fighting," Earl said. "No," Louise said. "Means he's got one shot left, and he knows it." That shot came Saturday afternoon, a knock at Louise's own front door this time, not the shop, not the courthouse. Kasner stood on her porch in a golf shirt instead of a suit, like he'd decided formality wasn't working and tried something else. "Mrs. Pruitt," he said, "I think we got off on the wrong foot." "We got off exactly on the foot you built," Louise said, not moving from the doorway. "What do you want?" "Cardinal Ridge is prepared to make this simple," Kasner said. "A settlement. We recognize your claim, quietly, and compensate you directly. No hearing, no television. Everybody walks away whole. How whole? $200,000, Kasner said. Cash, within 30 days. You sign a release, the depot expansion proceeds as planned, and your son's loan gets restructured favorably. Louise looked at him a long moment. 200,000 against a deed worth 6 times that, maybe more, once the county saw the whole 41 acres. You're offering me a sixth of what that ground's worth, she said, to keep quiet about the other 5. Kasner's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. I'm offering you certainty, Mrs. Pruitt. Courts are unpredictable. Public meetings are unpredictable. My husband spent 40 years making sure nothing about this was unpredictable, Louise said. I'll take my chances with the meeting. You're an old woman with a hardware store son and a shed full of rusted tools, Kasner said, voice tightening for the first time. Cardinal Ridge has lawyers who bill more in a week than your husband made in a year. Then you best tell them to clear their Tuesday evening, Louise said, and shut the door. She stood in her own front hall a moment, heart going fast despite herself, and then Earl's truck pulled into the drive, right on time, like he'd known. Monday night, the folder sat squared on Louise's kitchen table. Deed, survey, ledger pages photocopied twice over in case of accidents. Odessa's notarized statement, Renee's segment saved on a thumb drive Corey the clerk had helped her make. Earl sat across from her, going through it all one more time, glasses pushed low on his nose. You nervous? He asked. Some, Louise said. Harlan carried this alone 40 years. Feels strange, only having to carry it one more day. You're not carrying it alone, Earl said. Wasn't ever meant to be one person's weight. That's why he wrote your name on it in the first place, Dwight called at 9, voice tight. Mom, I talked to a lawyer today. Fella in Beckley, does small business stuff. He looked at the collateral language in my loan, and he says if that lot's inside a recorded trust that predates my note by 40 years, the bank never had valid collateral to begin with. Says the whole loan structure might collapse, not just the guarantee. That's good news, Dwight. Feels strange calling it good, Dwight said. Feels like I signed my name to something that was never real. You signed what you were told was real, Louise said. Tomorrow we make sure everybody hears what actually is. Sherry called an hour later, quieter than she'd been all week. I talked to the condo people, she said. Told them I need an extension. They said no. I lose the $9,000 if I don't close by Thursday. Louise closed her eyes a second. I'm sorry, Sherry. Are you going to fix it? I'm going to tell the truth tomorrow night, Louise said. What happens after that isn't mine to fix. It's just mine to answer for, same as everybody else's. Sherry didn't say anything for a while. I'll be there tomorrow, she said finally, front row. I want to see it myself. Tuesday came in gray and close, the kind of West Virginia heat that sat on a person's chest before noon. Louise dressed careful, her good navy dress, Harlan's wedding ring on the chain around her neck instead of buried in a drawer. Earl picked her up at 5, folder in a leather satchel Louise hadn't seen since Harlan's own funeral arrangements. Ready? Earl asked. No, Louise said, but I'm going anyway. The courthouse annex parking lot was fuller than Louise had ever seen it. Cars lined 2 deep along the curb. A Charleston News van parked crooked near the entrance with Renee Fitch's station logo on the side. Louise's stomach turned over once, hard, and then settled into something steadier underneath. Look at that, Earl said, low. Whole town decided to come watch. Word travels fast when it's finally true, Louise said. They walked up the annex steps together, Earl's hand steady under her elbow, the satchel heavy against Louise's hip like it carried more than paper. Ahead of them, through the glass doors, she could see the meeting room already filling, folding chairs dragged in from a supply closet, Roy Kasner standing near the front table in a gray suit, talking low and fast to a man Louise didn't recognize. Dwight was already inside, sitting near the aisle. Sherry 2 seats down from him, arms crossed, jaw set. They hadn't sat together, but they'd both come. Louise stopped just outside the door a moment, folder held tight against her chest, and looked at Earl. 40 years, she said. He kept this quiet 40 years so it'd still be worth something the day I needed it. Well, Earl said, today's the day. She pushed the door open and walked in. The meeting room smelled like coffee gone cold in a pot too long, folding chairs scraped against tile. Every seat was full, and people stood along the back wall, arms crossed, waiting. Louise found two empty chairs near the front, saved with Earl's hat sitting on one. Somebody had thought ahead. She sat down and set the satchel on her knees. Roy Kasner turned when he heard her chair creak. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a man checking a clock he already knew was wrong. "Mrs. Pruitt," he said, cordial, loud enough for the row behind him to hear. "Glad you could make it public." "Wouldn't miss it," Louise said. The county commission chairman, a heavy-set man named Purcell, rapped his gavel once. "We'll come to order," he said. "First item, Cardinal Ridge Development's request to finalize acquisition terms on the depot expansion parcel." Kasner stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the podium like he owned the floor already. "Commissioners," he said, "Cardinal Ridge has worked in good faith with this county for 8 months. We're prepared to close today, pending your approval. $1.2 million, full parcel, 40 acres. A murmur ran through the room. Sherry, 3 rows back, sat forward in her chair. "There's been some noise this week," Kasner went on, "about an old family dispute. I want to be respectful of that, but a private family matter shouldn't hold up a project that means jobs for this county." Purcell looked down the table. "Mrs. Pruitt, I understand you asked to speak." "I did," Louise said, and stood. Her knees ached walking to the podium, same as they had every morning for years. She set the satchel down and opened it slow, giving her hands something steady to do. "My husband worked at that depot 31 years, she said. "Foreman, then shop partner. Everybody in this room either knew him or bought a hammer from him." A few heads nodded. "When he died, his children split up what he left. House, savings, the business." Her voice didn't shake. "They gave me the shed out back, told me it was worthless. Tax lien on it, $2,200. Full of junk, they said." She lifted the deed out and laid it flat on the podium. It wasn't junk. It was a trust deed, recorded in this courthouse in 1978. 40 acres under the depot, under the loading platform, under a road Cardinal Ridge already poured concrete for. Kasner's jaw tightened. "Mrs. Pruitt, that document has not been authenticated." "It's been authenticated twice," Louise said. "Your own bank flagged it." County clerk confirmed the recording Thursday. She turned a page. "My husband's name is on it. Mine's on it too." "Trustee. He never told me. He just made sure the paper would tell me when it mattered." She set the ledgers down next, one at a time, stacked like bricks. "These are the account books. Every dollar that ever moved through that depot lot for 40 years. Every payment logged, every repair, every cent." She looked up. The books never lied to him. He made sure they'd never lie to me either. Earl stood then, without being asked, and walked up beside her. "I'm Earl Voss," he said. "Worked the machine shop with Harlan Pruitt 30 years. Those initials in the margins, E. V.E., that's me. I signed off on every repair entry myself. This is real bookkeeping, not a story somebody made up in a shed." Purcell leaned forward, reading glasses low on his nose. "Mrs. Pruitt, may we see the recording stamp?" Louise turned the deed around, page facing the commissioners. "Right there, county clerk's office. September 1978. Patricia Combs stood up from a side table Louise hadn't noticed until now, folder in hand. "I can confirm that," Patricia said. "We pulled the original this week. It's valid. It predates any lien or loan currently filed against that parcel." The room went loud all at once, voices stacking on top of each other. Purcell banged the gavel twice. "Order," he said. "Mr. Kasner, does Cardinal Ridge have a response?" Kasner stood slower this time. "We'd like a recess to review." "You had 8 months to review," Louise said. "You knew about this deed before I did. Your surveyor found the discrepancy in April, and you told him to keep quiet." That landed harder than anything else she'd said all night. A woman near the back gasped. Somebody's chair scraped loud against the floor. "That's a serious allegation," Kasner said, voice tight now, no cordial left in it. "It's a documented one," Louise said. "Franklin Teague's survey shows the boundary. Odessa Fitch's notary log shows the date. Your own filing shows you moved the closing twice to beat it." Purcell looked down the table at the other commissioners, then back at Kasner. "Mr. Kasner, does Cardinal Ridge intend to proceed with a purchase of land it doesn't have clean title to acquire?" Silence stretched long enough that Louise heard the air conditioning cycle on. We'll need to withdraw the item from today's agenda, Kasner said finally. Withdraw or walk away, Purcell said. Which is it? Kasner didn't answer right away. He looked at Louise once, something unreadable moving behind his eyes, and then he closed his folder. Withdraw, he said. Cardinal Ridge will not pursue this parcel. The room broke into noise again, half applause, half disbelief. Purcell let it run a moment before he brought the gavel down. So noted, he said. This item is closed. Motion to accept the recorded trust as valid, filed for the record. Second, said a commissioner near the end. All in favor. Every hand at that table went up. Louise stood at the podium a moment longer. Deed still spread open under the fluorescent light, and felt something in her chest loosen that had been clenched tight for 3 weeks. Maybe longer, maybe 40 years. She looked out at the room. Dwight was staring at his own hands. Sherry had both palms pressed over her mouth. That's the worthless shed, Louise said. Quiet now. Not into the microphone anymore, just for the row in front of her to hear. The one nobody wanted. Nobody answered her. Nobody needed to. She gathered the deed and the ledgers back into the satchel. Careful, the way she'd have handled anything Harlan built with his own hands. Earl held the strap open for her. Let's go home, he said. The drive back to Louise's house took 11 minutes, same as it always had. Neither of them said much. Earl kept both hands on the wheel, and Louise kept the satchel on her lap, like she still needed to feel the weight of it to believe the night had happened. You did good in there, Earl said, pulling into her drive. Harlan did good, Louise said. 40 years ago. I just carried the folder. Man doesn't record a land trust and hide a floor safe unless he trusts somebody to finish the job, Earl said. That was you tonight. Finishing it. Louise didn't answer that. She just looked at the porch light, still burning, same as she'd left it. The phone was ringing when she got inside. She let it ring twice before she picked up. Mrs. Pruitt, this is Gary Halstead, Cardinal Ridge Savings, same bank that had sent Dwight's 5-day notice. I understand there was a development at the commission meeting tonight. There was, Louise said. The collateral securing your son's business loan has come into question, Halstead said. Given the trust filing, our legal team believes the depot lot was never valid security. We'll need to restructure the note. Meaning what? Meaning the loan stands on the business assets alone. $22,000 at a lower rate extended to 5 years. He paused. It's the best we can offer given the exposure we're carrying tonight. Louise thanked him and hung up. She sat with that a minute, the number turning over in her mind. 22,000 stretched thin enough a hardware store could carry it. Not forgiveness, just room to breathe. Sherry called next, voice small on the line. Condo people kept the deposit, she said. $9,000. Gone. I'm sorry, Sherry. Are you? Sherry's voice cracked, then steadied. I watched you stand up there tonight and hand that man his own paperwork back like you'd been doing it 30 years. I didn't know you had that in you. Neither did I, Louise said, until I had to. Sherry was quiet a long moment. I don't know how to feel about any of this. You don't have to know tonight, Louise said. Get some sleep. Call me when you do. She hung up and sat at her kitchen table a while, the folder still in front of her, Earl across from her, nursing a cup of coffee neither of them had touched. She'll come around, Earl said, or she won't. Either way, you did right by her tonight. You didn't gloat. Wasn't anything to gloat about, Louise said. Just paper telling the truth. Dwight showed up the next evening, no call ahead, boots still dusty from the store. He stood in Louise's doorway like a man who hadn't decided whether he was welcome. Bank called, he said. Told me the new terms. I heard, Louise said. Come in. He sat at the table, hands folded, looking older than 43. I want to say something, Mom, and I want you to let me finish before you say anything back. Louise nodded. I signed that loan against ground I didn't understand, Dwight said. I didn't ask enough questions. I let a man in a nice suit tell me what my own father's shed was worth, and I believed him because it was easier than digging. He looked up. That's on me. Not you, not Dad. Me. All right, Louise said. I want to ask you something, and you can say no. Dwight's jaw worked a second. The depot lot. Your lot now. I need somewhere flat to store overstock, lumber mostly, once the store's back on its feet. I can't afford to buy ground like that, but I could lease a corner of it, pay you fair, $400 a month, something like that. Louise studied her son a long moment. 43 years old, standing in her kitchen asking permission for something his father would have handed him without a word, back before any of this. "I'll lease you the north corner," Louise said. "$400 a month, in writing, reviewed every year, same as I do with any tenant." "Any tenant?" Dwight repeated, half a laugh in it. "Fair enough." "It's not punishment, Dwight," Louise said. "It's just how your father would have wanted it run. Everything in writing." Everything counted. Dwight nodded slow. "I think I finally understand why he kept so many books." "Books don't play favorites," Louise said. "That's why he trusted them more than people some days." Earl came by that Saturday morning, ladder strapped in the truck bed, 2 cans of paint rattling in the toolbox behind the cab. "Figured that door could use a coat," he said. "Man kept it fresh 40 years running. Seems wrong to let it go gray now. First summer he's gone." Louise stood in the yard, arms crossed, watching him set the ladder against the workshop wall. "I can paint my own door, Earl Voss." "Never said you couldn't," Earl said. "Said I brought the paint." She took the brush from him anyway, dipped it, and started at the top hinge, working down slow, same rhythm she'd used every birthday for 40 years. Except this time, the door stood open behind her, safe empty, ledgers already boxed up and driven to the bank for safekeeping, deed filed proper with the county clerk under her own name. "Feels different," she said. "Painting a door I've been inside." "Bet it does," Earl said. She got to the bottom panel and stopped, brush hovering. There was a spot there, low corner where the old paint had cracked away to bare wood. Underneath it, faint, she could just make out pencil marks, half worn to nothing. "Earl," she said, "come look at this." Earl crouched down beside her, squinting at the wood grain. 2 letters faded, almost past reading, but not quite. "L period P period," Earl said slow. "That your initials, Louise?" Louise ran her thumb over the marks, careful, like they might rub away if she pressed too hard. "He put my name on the door," she said. "Same year he put it on the deed." "Reckon he meant for you to find both," Earl said. "Eventually." Louise dipped the brush again and covered the initials with a fresh coat, slow, giving them 1 more year of paint, the way Harlan always had. Earl straightened up, knees popping. "You going to leave that door blank forever," he said, "or put something on it now that it's finally yours to mark?" "Been thinking about that," Louise said. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked inside the shed. The safe stood open in the corner, empty now, ledgers already at the bank, the deed filed. Only the tin box was left, sitting on the workbench where she'd set it 3 weeks back. She pried the lid and counted the bills again. $640, same as the first count, old and soft in her hands, folded the way a man folds money when he means to keep it a long time. "That's near enough to clear the tax lien," Earl said, looking over her shoulder. $2,200, wasn't it?" "It was," Louise said. "County already dropped it once the trust recorded. Deed predates the lien by 20 years. Patricia told me Thursday." "So the money's just yours then?" "Reckon it is." Louise turned a bill over in her fingers. "But I don't want it just sitting in my purse. Feels like the wrong kind of quiet." Earl leaned against the bench. "What kind you want instead?" "I want to open this shed back up," Louise said. "Not as a museum, as a shop. Real work, same as your 2 used to do." Earl went quiet a second, the kind of quiet that meant he was turning something over careful. "You asking me to come out of retirement, Louise Pruitt?" "I'm asking you to be my partner," she said. "Same as you were his. Machine work, small repairs, maybe rent bench space to somebody younger who wants to learn it. Depot land's not going anywhere now. Might as well put it to use before some other Cardinal Ridge comes along wanting it." Earl rubbed his jaw. 81 years old, bad knee, bad back some mornings. You climbed a ladder an hour ago." "That's different," Earl said. "That's paint." "Man who can hang a ladder can hang a sign," Louise said. He laughed, short and real. "All right. What's the sign say?" Louise looked at the door, blank now under the fresh coat, hinge still bright where she'd started. "Voss and Pruitt," she said. Same order the ledger initials ran. E period V period first. "Harland have put your name first," Earl said. Man wasn't shy about giving credit where it landed. "Harlan's not signing this one," Louise said. "You are." Patricia Combs called that afternoon, voice brisk and businesslike, same as the day she'd flagged the deed at the bank counter. Recorded confirmation came through this morning, Patricia said. Trust is clean. Leon's released, effective the date of filing. You'll get a letter for your files, but it's done. Thank you, Patricia. Don't thank me, Patricia said. Thank whoever taught your husband to fill out paperwork right the first time. In 40 years of clerking, I've never seen a trust that tidy. He had 30 years of ledgers to practice on, Louise said. Man didn't like leaving loose ends. Well, he didn't leave you any, Patricia said. That land's yours, clean and clear, 40 acres. County wanted me to ask if you'd consider a new lease arrangement now that Cardinal Ridge walked. They still want that spur road eventually. Tell them I'll listen, Louise said. But I set the terms this time, in writing, reviewed every year. Patricia laughed, quick and warm. I'll pass that along word for word. Dwight came back Sunday with a folded paper in his shirt pocket, boots clean for once, like he'd stopped somewhere to knock the dust off before knocking on her door. Lease terms, he said, holding it out. $400 a month, north corner, like you said. Had Franklin Teague marked the boundary so there's no argument later. Louise read it over at the kitchen table, slow, checking every line the way Harlan had taught her without ever meaning to. This is good work, Dwight. Wanted to get it right, he said. Figured you'd read closer than the bank did. I read everything now, Louise said. Learned that much this month. He shifted in his chair. Store's steadier already. New loan terms, $22,000 at the lower rate. I can breathe again. He paused. I told the two boys who work register I'm not selling out from under them. Whatever else happens, Pruitt Hardware stays Pruitt Hardware. Good, Louise said. Your father built that name off actual nails and actual paint, not promises to a man in a suit. Dwight nodded, looked down at his hands. I keep thinking about the shed, he said. All those years I figured it was just where Dad went to get away from us. Turns out he was working the whole time, just not the kind of work anybody could see. He was protecting something, Louise said. Took him 40 years, but he finished it. Wish I'd asked him more questions while he was here. So do I, Louise said. But we've got the ones he answered anyway. Just took some digging. Dwight signed the lease at the bottom, dated it, slid it across. Louise signed under him, same table, same pen Harlan used to keep by the phone. North corner's yours, she said, long as the check's clear. They will, Dwight said. I'll make sure of it. He stood to go, then stopped at the door, looking back at her like there was one more thing sitting on his tongue. Sherry called me last night, he said. Asked if I thought you'd ever really forgive either of us. Louise folded her hands on the table. I already told her I would answer for my part, she said. Didn't say anything about handing out forgiveness on a schedule. That's not mine to rush, Dwight. Not for you, not for her. Fair, Dwight said, and let himself out quiet, boots soft on the porch boards. Earl showed up Tuesday with a sign blank under his arm, raw pine, sanded smooth on one side. He set it across 2 sawhorses in the yard and started laying out letters in pencil first, careful, the way a man measures twice before he commits paint to wood. VOSS, he said, talking to himself as much as her. Ampersand, then PRUITT. 2 T's, Louise said, watching from the porch step. Man was particular about his own name. I know how to spell your husband's name, Louise. Earl grinned anyway, checking it twice. She came down and stood beside him while he worked, the brush moving slow and sure across the grain. Down the road, the old depot sat quiet. No survey stakes in the ground anymore. No orange flags marking a boundary line that didn't belong to Cardinal Ridge after all. Funny thing, Louise said. 40 years I thought this shed was the smallest thing he owned. Turns out it was the biggest. Wasn't the shed that was big, Earl said, not looking up from the lettering, was what he put inside it. He finished the last letter and stepped back to look, wiping his hands on a rag gone gray with old paint. Needs to dry before we hang it, he said. Give it the night. Louise looked at the door, the fresh coat still faintly wet where her own initials sat buried under it, and then at the blank patch above the frame where the sign would go once it cured. One more night then, she said. One more night, Earl agreed. After 40 years, reckon it can wait till morning. Morning came up gray over Piney Ridge, fog still sitting low along Route 9, where the old rail bed used to run trains twice a day. Earl was already in the yard when Louise stepped out with her coffee, the sign propped against the workbench, paint dry and dark against the raw pine. Didn't sleep much, Earl said. Kept thinking I'd smudged a letter. You didn't. Went out at 2 in the morning with a flashlight to check? Louise laughed, first real laugh in 3 weeks that didn't have grief writing underneath it. 81 years old, checking paint by flashlight. Man's got to be sure, Earl said. Harlan taught me that. Measure twice. They carried the sign together, one on each end, and set it against the doorframe while Earl fetched the drill from his truck. The brass hook Louise had polished every birthday for 40 years still sat screwed into the frame, worn smooth at the edges from all that handling. We'll hang it above the hook, Earl said. Won't crowd it. Won't crowd it, Louise agreed. He drilled 2 pilot holes, careful, checking level with a little bubble tool clipped to his belt loop. Louise held the sign steady while he drove the screws home, one and then the other, the wood settling flush against the frame like it had always belonged there. Voss Pruitt, it read, black letters on raw pine, no fancy scroll work, no border. Just the 2 names, same order the ledger initials had run for 30 years. There it is, Earl said, stepping back. Louise stood beside him, coffee going cold in her hand, looking at the door she'd painted every June for 4 decades without ever once turning the knob. Feels smaller now, she said. Sign on it. Feels like a business, Earl said. That's different than small. A truck came up the gravel drive before either of them could say more, dust rising behind it in the morning light. Not Dwight's. A younger man Louise didn't recognize, maybe 25, ball cap pushed back, stepping out slow like he wasn't sure he had the right house. Help you? Earl called. Looking for the machine shop, the young man said. Fella at the diner said there's work starting up out here again. Repair work. Said to ask for a Voss. That's me, Earl said. Cody Marsh. He put a hand out. I did 2 years at the Viotech in Beckley before the money ran out. Was hoping somebody around here still hired hands willing to learn instead of just wanting the finished article. Earl looked at Louise. Louise looked at the sign, still smelling of fresh paint, then back at the young man standing in the drive with his cap pushed back and his hands already looking for something to do. We're not hiring yet, Louise said. Not officially, but we could use a hand clearing benches this week. Paid. Same as any work. We'll see how it goes from there. Yes, ma'am, Cody said. I can start today if you want. $10 an hour, Earl said. Cash. Till we get the books set up proper. Louise here keeps better books than anybody in this county, so once she's got a system, you'll get a real paycheck. Better books than anybody, Louise repeated, half a smile in it. High bar. Set by your husband, Earl said. You're the one keeping it. Cody Marsh went to work that morning clearing 40 years of dust off benches nobody but Harlan had ever touched, and Louise stood in the doorway a while just watching, the way a foreman might, though she'd never called herself that before this month. The county called at noon. Patricia Combs again, voice warm on the line. Wanted you to hear it from me before it hit the paper, Patricia said. Cardinal Ridge Development formally withdrew their offer this morning. Filed the letter with the commission an hour ago. I figured they might, Louise said. There's more, Patricia said. Commission's asked if you'd consider leasing the county a right-of-way strip just 12 feet along the old rail bed for a walking trail project. Grant money, nothing to do with Cardinal Ridge, different animal entirely. What's it pay? $600 a year, plus they maintain the trail themselves. You keep the land, they keep the path mowed. Louise turned that over. Send me the terms in writing, she said. I'll read every line. Wouldn't expect anything less from you these days, Patricia said, and there was something like real respect in it, not just courthouse courtesy. Sherry called that evening, later than usual, voice worn thin over the phone. I signed a lease on an apartment in Beckley, she said. 1 bedroom, cheaper than anything on the coast. That's a start, Louise said. I'm not asking you for anything, Mom. Just wanted you to know I'm not disappearing. I appreciate you telling me, Louise said. She didn't offer more than that. And Sherry didn't ask for it. Some doors take longer to paint than others. Louise had learned that much firsthand. Maybe I'll come by sometime, Sherry said. See the shop. Doors open, Louise said. During work hours anyway. They left it there, quiet on both ends, no promises made either way. Louise hung up and sat a minute at her kitchen table, looking at the phone like it might ring again with something easier to answer. It didn't. Dwight came out to the depot lot Thursday afternoon with a flatbed loaded with lumber, backing it in slow toward the north corner Louise had marked off with stakes and string. First delivery, he said, climbing down. Figured I'd break the lease in proper. Franklin Teague, come check the stakes? Signed off on it yesterday, Dwight said. You'll get the survey copy in the mail. He looked past her at the workshop, sign fresh on the door. Cody Marsh inside running a wire brush over some old lathe fixture. Didn't expect you to actually open it back up. Your father didn't build it to sit empty, Louise said. Neither will I. Dwight nodded slow, watching the young man work a minute before he spoke again. Store did 4,000 in sales this week, he said. First good week since the funeral. New loan terms are already easier to carry. Glad to hear it. I keep the ledger current now, Dwight said. Every sale, every expense. Learned that much watching you at that podium. Your father would like hearing that, Louise said. Dwight looked down at his boots. Quiet a second. I still owe you an apology I haven't said right, he said. Not for the loan. For not asking you a single question about any of this while he was alive, like you weren't even in the room. You've said it, Louise said. I heard you the first time. Don't need to keep paying the same debt twice. He almost smiled at that. Ledgers, he said. Once it's counted, it's counted. Now you're learning, Louise said. He drove off a few minutes later, truck bed empty, dust settling behind him same as always. Louise stood at the edge of the lot a while, looking out at the 40 acres running down toward the old rail bed, grass gone gold in the July light. No survey stakes anywhere, but the ones marking Dwight's little corner. Earl came up beside her, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. County trail folks called the shop line, he said. Want to walk the right of way with you Monday? Monday's fine. Cody's asking can he come back tomorrow. Says he likes the work. Tell him yes, Louise said. Tell him to bring his own gloves this time. Man went through 2 pair today. Earl laughed, short and easy, the kind of laugh that came natural to him now in a way it hadn't 3 weeks back, when they were both still standing in a kitchen full of other people's grief. Feels like something's actually starting, he said, not just ending. Both, maybe, Louise said. Some things have to end before the other thing can start. She looked back at the workshop door, the brass hook still empty beside the new sign, the key itself riding in her apron pocket where it had lived since the night she first turned it in that lock. 40 years she'd polished that hook without a key to hang from it. Now she had the key and no reason yet to let it go. Not tonight, she said, half to Earl, half to herself. Hook can wait a little longer. Suit yourself, Earl said. Door's not going anywhere. No, Louise said. First time in 40 years, I know exactly where it's going. She turned back toward the house, apron pocket heavy against her hip, the sign behind her catching the last of the evening sun square across 2 names painted in equal-sized letters. Same weight, same standing, the way her husband would have wanted it kept all along. Friday afternoon, Cody Marsh lined up at the workbench with his hand out, waiting on his first pay. Louise had a ledger open in front of her, spine still stiff, pages blank except for 1 column of figures in her own handwriting. 22 hours, she said. $10 an hour. $220. Yes, ma'am. Cody counted the bills twice before folding them into his shirt pocket. You'll sign here. She turned the ledger toward him. Every week. Hours. Wages. Your initials. He signed CM next to the date. Careful. Like he understood the letters mattered more than they looked like they should. Why the fuss over initials? He asked. Nobody at the Votech ever made us sign anything. Man who owned this shop before me kept every hour on paper, Louise said. Turned out to matter more than anybody guessed. I don't plan on breaking the habit. Cody nodded slow, like that answer satisfied something he hadn't known he was asking. Earl came in from the lot, dust on his boots, grease under 2 fingernails. Trail crews out marking stakes along the rail bed, he said. Ought to be done by supper. County pays on the 1st of the month, Louise said. $600 a year, same as Patricia quoted. Small money, Earl said. Steady money, Louise said. I've learned to like steady better than big. The phone rang inside the house before Earl could answer that. Louise crossed the yard to catch it, screen door banging soft behind her. Patricia Combs, brisk as ever. Got a minute? Always for you, Patricia. Commission met Wednesday, Patricia said. Voted to add a new step to the tax office procedure. Any parcel with a structure over 20 years old, before they can file a lien or push it to sale, they've got to run a trust search at the courthouse first. Full search, not just a glance at the deed book. Because of me? Because of you, Patricia said. Took your file straight to the commissioners myself. Told them what almost happened to a woman who did nothing wrong except marry a careful man. Louise sat down at the kitchen table, phone cord stretched tight across her shoulder. That's a lot of trouble over one shed. Wasn't just your shed, Patricia said. There's a widow out past Hiko, Ruth Calloway, 82 years old. County had her husband's tool barn slated for the same kind of lien sale next spring. My clerk ran the new search this morning as a test case. Found a trust filed back in '69. She'd have lost that barn and never known what was under the floor. Does she know yet? Letter goes out Monday, Patricia said. I wanted you to hear it before the paper does. Wasn't going to let another Louise Pruitt walk into a kitchen and get told there was nothing left for her. Louise sat with that a moment, phone warm against her ear. Tell her to bring a friend when she opens that barn, she said, somebody who knew her husband's handwriting. I'll pass it along, Patricia said, and there was something almost gentle under the courthouse briskness. You did more than save your own acreage, Louise. You changed how this county checks its books. Wasn't trying to change anything, Louise said. Was just trying to read what my husband left me. Sometimes that's the same thing, Patricia said, and rang off. Louise sat a while longer at the table, looking at the phone like it might have more to say. It didn't. She stood, smoothed her apron, and walked back out toward the shop. The light had gone long and gold across the lot, the kind of evening light that made the fresh paint on the workshop door look almost warm. Cody had gone home for supper. Earl was sweeping metal shavings into a dustpan, unhurried, the broom scraping soft against the concrete. Trail crew wrapped early, he said. Told me the whole right-of-way staked clean to the county line. Good, Louise said. One less thing to argue over. Earl set the broom against the wall and looked at her, the way a man looks when he's got something to say and isn't sure it's his place. You've been carrying that key in your apron 3 weeks now, he said. I've watched you touch it a dozen times a day. Louise reached into her apron pocket, felt the old brass skeleton key, warm from sitting against her all afternoon. Habit, she said. 40 years of reaching for a lock that wasn't mine to open. It's yours now, Earl said. Been yours the whole time, near as I can tell. Just took the county a month to admit it. Louise walked to the door and looked at the hook beside it, brass gone bright at the edges from 4 decades of polishing rag and no key ever hanging there. She'd shine that hook every June without once knowing what it was waiting for. He built that hook the same summer he built the bench, she said. I always figured it was decoration. Man wasn't given to decoration. Nothing your husband built was decoration, Earl said. Ledger proved that plain enough. Louise held the key up, turning it once in the last of the light, the metal worn smooth along one edge where a thumb had rubbed it for years before hers ever touched it. 40 years I dusted this hook for a key I never had, she said. Tonight I've got the key and no lock left worth hiding. Door still locks, Earl said. Just isn't hiding anything from you anymore. She slipped the key onto the hook. It caught the last light and held there, small and plain, swinging once before it settled still against the freshly painted wood. There, she said. 40 years late. Right on time anyway. Earl studied it a second, hands in his pockets. Man wanted you to have that shop, he said. Just didn't figure out how to say it out loud while he had the chance. He said it in ledgers, Louise said. Man always did talk best on paper. Earl picked his hat off the workbench, settled it, and started for his truck. Same time tomorrow? Same time, Louise said. Bring Cody's gloves if you see him at the diner. He'll need a fresh pair by Monday. Will do. Earl paused at the truck door, looking back at the shop, sign catching gold across 2 names painted level with each other. Feels like a real place now, he said. Not just a shed with a story stuck to it. It was always a real place, Louise said. Took the rest of us a while to catch up to what he already knew. Earl laughed, short and warm, and pulled out of the lot, gravel popping under his tires, dust rising thin behind him in the evening air. Louise stood alone a minute, hand still resting near the doorframe, the brass key catching one last thread of sun before the light slid off it entirely. Somewhere down past the rail bed, a truck downshifted on Route 9, headed toward Beckley or maybe further, carrying somebody else's whole life packed in the back of it. She thought of Ruth Calloway, 82 years old, a letter coming to her mailbox on Monday morning, a barn she hadn't looked twice at in years about to open up its own quiet truth. She thought of Harlan, 30 years bent over that workbench, filling pages nobody was meant to read until he was gone. She turned once more toward the door, checked the hinge she'd painted fresh not 3 weeks back, and pulled it shut for the night. The latch caught clean, the way it always had, long before anyone but Harlan knew what it was really protecting. Louise walked back toward the house under a sky going the color of rust. Apron lighter now, pocket empty for the first time in a month. The brass key stayed on its hook, catching moonlight before the porch light ever came on.